кров у серці, як дизель в двигунах. Важкий кевлар не гріє, він душу опікає. Атаку сухопутні ідуть війська. Піхота йде, вони безстрашні, піхота рве ворожу пащу, вимаєм йти, міцніше сталі, віддати честь нашій державі. Війська ідуть, летять снаряди, небесний грім, несуть армади, війська землі, міцніше сталі, за нами мир і честь держави.
Пройду неухильно тяжкий шлях войны мерзотной и кривавой на наших волотных пляжах. Уздымем стяг шляхетной славы, я Калиновский наш кастусь. Мне приклад так и лёс Литвина, я вызволяю Беларусь. Про вызволение Украины як тур клянусь оборонить. У пекле битвы побратима. Наш гонор вечно буде жить у памяти моей родимы. Обовязково повернусь, коли у битвах не загину. Уродный край у Беларусь, про вызволение Украины. Уродный край у Беларусь, про вызволение Украины.
Із Америки приїхав наш надійний побратим, познайомтеся із ним. В росіян зі сраки дим. Ла-ла-ла-ла-ла. За ракетою ракету на паскудних ворогів випускає весь наш гнів. Робить все без зайвих слів. Ла-ла-ла-ла. Московити зі снарядами гребуться на складах, коли робить свій бабах. Наганяє лютий страх. Ла-ла-ла-ла. Розробляють окупанти свої плани у штабах, але чути знов бабах. Лупить нечисть по зубах. Ла-ла-ла-ла-ла. окупанти лиш заповнили склади своїм пальним, як вітається із ним.
Герой Марс!
Підіймає чорний дим.
Герой Марс!
Ла-ла-ла-ла.
Герой Марс!
Не любити московитів і довести нелюбов помагає знов і знов.
Герой Марс!
Найточніший орколов.
Герой Марс!
Ла-ла-ла-ла.
Герой Марс!
Ла-ла-ла-ла. Ла-ла-ла-ла. Ла-ла-ла-ла.
Герой Марс!
Ла-ла-ла-ла. Ла-ла-ла-ла. Ла-ла-ла-ла.
Герой Марс!
Прийшли окупанти до нас в Україну, форма новенька, воєнні машини, та трохи поплавився їх інвентар. Байрактар. Байрактар. Російські танкісти сховались в кущі, щоб лаптем посьорбати довбані щі, та трохи у щах перегрівся навар. Байрактар. Байрактар. Приперли зі сходу до нас барани для восстановлення
великой страны.
Найкращий пастух баранячих отар. Байрактар. Байрактар. Їх доводи всяке озброєння різне, потужні ракети, машини залізні, у нас на всі доводи є коментар. Байрактар. Байрактар. Вони захопити хотіли нас зразу, а ми зачаїли на орків образу з російських бандитів. Робить примар. Байрактар. Байрактар. Російська поліція справи заводить, там вбивцю рашистів ніяк не знаходить, хто винен, що в нашому полі глухар. Байрактар. Байрактар. Веде пропаганду кремлівський урод, слова пропаганди ковтає народ, тепер нове слово знає цар.
Байрактар.
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 Hello everyone, I'm the Enforcer, and I'm accompanied by Enforcer Matt.
And good evening, everybody. It's Enforcer Matt. Welcome back to the stream. It is now day 164, and it's good to be back with you all once more.
And of course, we're going to be reporting on the past 24 hours of the war in Ukraine, and we have some really interesting news tonight, because not only does it appear that we've had some very disturbing news from the Zaporizhzhia Nuclear Powerplant area south of Zaporizhzhia, but we also have news suggestive of a couple of interesting, I guess you could say, gestures of goodwill by the Russians that are only rumors at this point. We'll be seeing if these actually do coalesce into reality here in the future, but we will be covering those, although at this point it's just hearsay. We would like to be ahead of the curve just in case if it is actually going to happen. But without further ado, we also have another thing that was not included in the thumbnail tonight, but we will be covering, instead of at the beginning of the stream tonight, we'll be covering at the end, which is a continuation of the, I guess you could say, the events that have been occurring in Israel over yesterday and today, which we will be covering in its own international news segment. But before we get to all that, we of course have to go over tonight's schedule and explain what we're going to be doing and in what order. And so, without further ado, we will actually be beginning at the Zaporizhzhia Nuclear Powerplant. This is the most pressing bit of news that we've gotten tonight, and I think that it's something that deserves a lot of attention, as it does appear, as we've been able to get news, not really a lot of video evidence of the actual event, that the Zaporizhzhia Nuclear Powerplant was apparently struck by Russian artillery, which has caused severe damage not only to the power plant, but to other systems around it. We'll be covering that, of course, right at the very beginning of the news segment. We'll then be moving into the Kherson area and Sevastopol as well to cover the news there, and then we'll be moving into Russia to cover the Russian state TV that we saw today, which I know that some people wonder why do we show it, and I like to show what the Russian people are actually watching on TV and what the Russian government allows to be said, which is pretty much their true feelings about what's going on in this war since it's being allowed. After we cover all that news, we'll then be moving into the location unknowns and covering that as well. After that, we'll then go into a 3-question segment. We'll take a quick pause from the news to answer 3 questions from the chat. And after we answer those 3 questions, we'll then be moving on into the Kharkiv area, where we've seen a massive pickup of activity, the likes of which has not been seen in a long time, especially on a single day. After we cover that news, we'll then be moving further down the front into the Izium area as well as the Orlivka area and covering the news there as well. After we cover that news, we'll then be moving down into the Donetsk as well. And before we move on to the southern front itself, we will take a quick pause to answer another 3 questions from the chat. And after we answer those 3 questions, we'll then be moving on into our last segment of news, which is the southern front news, and also the international news, which is only the Israeli/Gaza news that we got today. There was a continuation of yesterday's events, and it appears that the, I guess you could say, hostilities in between the militants in the Gaza Strip as well as the Israeli Defense Force are only escalating as time goes by. So, without further ado, let's get to the most pressing bit of news we've had today, which is, of course, the Zaporizhzhia Nuclear Powerplant. We don't actually have video evidence of the power plant being struck by artillery, but nuclear regulatory commissions that are internationally based have been saying that the power plant has been hit. There's also been reports from the ground saying that the power plant has been struck, and we got one video today in this little clip showing Russian vehicles and also workers leaving the power plant and Russian vehicles then driving towards it. So I'm going to show you this video real quick, and it also has someone talking in it. The translation appears to be in either Russian or Ukrainian. So I'm going to let you all watch this video, and then we're going to try and explain what's going on there and why it's a serious issue.
Источники инсайдер сообщают о подозрительной активности на Запорожской АЭС, оккупированной российскими военными. 2 августа на территорию АЭС прибыла колонна военных грузовиков. Они остановились между первым и вторым энергоблоками, а потом по одной машине начали заезжать на территорию машинного зала первого энергоблока через грузовые ворота. По данным этого источника, военные заминировали машинный зал. Другой источник инсайдер сообщает, что на АЭС находится около 500 российских солдат и военная техника, в том числе БТРы, зенитные установки и техника для радиохимической разведки. Он сообщает о том, что российские военные заминировали территорию АЭС, а мины и боекомплект российские военные хранят в непосредственной близости от энергоблоков под эстакадами.
That's the end of the video, and it appears to be somewhat alarming news. The video does not show it exactly, but we have heard that artillery strikes have apparently hit one of the reactor casings. Well, not exactly the reactor casing, but the reactor building of one of these 6 reactors. And we also heard that one artillery shell struck a high voltage power line outside of the power plant, and that in its own right is far more in my opinion, concerning than the power plant itself being hit. And let me explain why. A while ago, y'all may have remembered that we were trying to make a video on the Browns Ferry Nuclear Power Plant here in Alabama. And in the process of doing that, we actually learned a lot about how nuclear power plants work and how they operate. And how a nuclear power plant operates is surprisingly that they require electricity from other parts of the grid to be able to keep the nuclear reactors running. If a nuclear power plant is disconnected from the grid, that means that that power plant will melt down unless if emergency generators can then turn on and continue to provide power to the power plant so that way they can shut down the reactors. This is something that's pretty concerning to me, considering that one of those was hit. Of course, every nuclear power plant has multiple high voltage lines, but for example, if a decent amount of them are hit, that may be putting the power plant itself into jeopardy of going into meltdown if, for say, that artillery shell also damaged the emergency generators that are there at the power plant. And so it's very concerning news. We'll, of course, be keeping an eye on it, and it seems like it's raising a lot of eyebrows as to why the Russians bombarded a nuclear power plant that they have controlled for months on end. We're still trying to get the exact details of the story ringed out. We don't have any video evidence of any of this yet, rather than that one video of Russian vehicles moving around the power plant. So we'll be trying to keep up with this as best as possible, but I did want everyone to know what we currently have an idea of going on at the Zaporizhzhia power plant, and hopefully something can be done to rectify this situation. Moving on out of the Inhadar area, we have heard that apparently things are not going well in the Kherson front for the Russians. Although we haven't heard of a lot of Ukrainian activity where they're trying to push the Russians back across the banks of the Dnipro River, it does appear that there are rumors circling that the Russian military is in fact preparing to withdraw from the area. We're not entirely sure if this report is true. There's not a lot of backup to this in video evidence or picture evidence or even official Russian statements or Ukrainian statements for that matter, but it is being circled around a decent bit that the Russians, at least on the ground from eyewitness reports, appear that they're going to be withdrawing from this entire area. Now, what does this mean? This means that the Ukrainians just won back the major port city of Kherson, if it does happen. But then again, it may not. We did see one video today, a single lone video of a Ukrainian naval infantry's artillery raining down fire on Russian forces outside the city, at least a couple of miles outside of Kherson. Here's the video. When you see this village here, it's a very small one. And we see the artillery coming in and slamming into the Russian positions. When you see the black smoke of death letting us know that a vehicle was hit and destroyed. And that's the end of the video. And I gotta say, the naval infantry of the Ukrainian armed forces has a really cool outro card. I don't know about y'all, but I have to say, that's a really impressive one. With that, talking about the Kherson situation again, one thing that we do know for certain is that all Russian vehicles, if they're trying to cross onto the other side of the Dnipro River and the Russians are withdrawing, only have one bridge access to work off of, which is the Antonovsky pontoon bridge. All three bridge crossings have been knocked out over the course of the past 2 weeks, and so it would be largely impossible for the Russians to be able to move a large amount of their vehicles out of the front unless they funneled them down all into one choke point, which is right near the Antonovsky Bridge. And so they might leave the vehicles behind because if they tried to evacuate them all, it would cause a clog, it would take a lot of time to get them all across the pontoon bridge, and the Ukrainians could start destroying masses of vehicles that the Russians would have lost anyways. And so they might just sign those off and try and move the infantry across the bridge, and we may even see that it was a farce that 25,000 additional troops have been added to this front. We haven't been able to get any kind of official confirmation on those numbers yet. It seems the Russians have been saying it, but no U.S. satellite footage has backed that up, and Ukrainian reports haven't really backed that up either. And so we don't even know if those 25,000 troops really have moved to this front or not. That may have been entirely a ruse by the Russians as well to try and make sure that if the Ukrainians were going to conduct a counterattack, it would look less favorable for them. Still, we'll be watching the Kherson area with great intent, and we may see another attempt of a sign of goodwill by the Russians as they may be retreating from the Kherson area by and large. We'll, of course, still be waiting and seeing for that news, but I just want y'all to know, just in case if it does happen, it seems right now that that stuff might be in motion. Moving on down to Sevastopol, I actually have a pretty sad image to show y'all, and I don't even know why these Russians are still into the war, but here's a video of 2 Russian soldiers that are returning from the war. And so I'm gonna play the audio. I don't know if the music is copyrighted, but I would like y'all to hear their voices because for some reason, although they have been brutally mangled by the war and what's happened to them because of it, they're still keeping an ecstatic tone, and I don't really know why. But anyways, here's the video.
Привет, друзья!
Приветствую, дорогие друзья.
Сейчас я нахожусь в Севастополе с моим белорусским другом. Мы один народ.
Очень рад быть сегодня здесь, в этом прекрасном городе Севастополь, город русских моряков. Впервые в своей жизни.
Я не впервые. А вот за сколько лет у нас сама Белоруссия, Севастополь. Мы один народ.
Мы один народ. Так было и так будет всегда.
What one was there to be happy about? If we go back and look at the video, this guy has lost both of his legs, his arm all the way up to his shoulder, and he's also lost everything on his forearm. This guy has lost a forearm. It looks like he may have also lost a leg because he's sitting on some kind of a scooting chair thing. And they're sitting here still wearing disease, still rooting for the Russians, and I don't know why. Because the Russian government does not care about them whatsoever. And I've said this a lot of times, but that's always important to say. We've seen Russian soldiers not even give a care in the world that their friend was just killed right alongside them. We've seen the Russian government literally make sure not to collect bodies from the front lines, so that way their family doesn't know that their son or their daughter has been killed on the front lines for them to get any kind of compensation for their death. We've seen this happening all over, and I would have to say these poor guys here must be drinking the Kool-Aid or entirely disillusioned because they're fighting for a country and a government that doesn't even care for them. They might even, this guy right here may even go back to Russia and end up like that other guy we saw in the wheelchair where he's threatened with a bat where he can't get on a bus. And so with that, we're now going to be moving on out of Sevastopol and from this somewhat unfortunate news and kind of sad news, seeing that they still don't realize that the Russian government just doesn't care for them. And we're now going to be moving up to Moscow. All right, everyone, put on your tinfoil hats because y'all know what we're about to go into is going to be some pretty dumb stuff. Probably the dumbest stuff you've ever seen. What the Russians say on state TV belongs in a Ripley's Believe It or Not because the stuff they say is just unbelievable, and today is no exception. I wanted to make sure to show this to y'all today because a decent amount of the time, so believe it or not, I don't show a lot of clips that I've seen of Russian state TV every single day. I just show the ones that are the most outlandish and craziest because it's just unbelievable that this kind of stuff is said. So with that, if the video loads, here's the video. Alright. So, I'm not sure if y'all be able to read this. It's probably going to be cut off about halfway. And so I'm going to have it muted, and I'm going to read over it, so that way I can make sure that y'all see what's going on here. Aryans from Build jumped on your favorite program. 60 minutes. Watch. Pardon the expression, we freaked out over here when we saw that what Russian propagandists were saying and the way they talk about our amazing correspondent. Watch. Putin's main propagandist, Popov, is trying to besmirch our Bjorn Stritzel, our war correspondent, who for months has been very professionally reporting from Ukraine. Here's Popov, Putin's main propagandist. Time and time again calls our Bjorn a Nazi in his program 60 Minutes. Popov keeps showing our correspondent against the backdrop of German howitzers and is trying to besmirch him to multi-million audience. The Russians were agitated by Bjorn's report from the front lines in eastern Ukraine. He was talking about and showing how Ukrainians are using their great howitzers to Panzerhaubitze 2000s. Russians are calling our howitzers Nazi and fascist, and repeatedly called our Bjorn a Nazi. Our great-grandparents have been burning the equipment of your great-grandparents and gave you a whooping. Our friends and neighbors, the best people of Russia, are doing the same right now. The outcome will be the same. I'm sure even you undoubtedly know this. Aryan propagandists and warmongers, unlike you, the descendant of Goebbels and Nazi agitators, our reporters have been working in Donbass and Ukraine since the very beginning of the mayhem you've created. I don't give a damn. I want to tell this Nazi, bitch, all of us will come and kill all of you. Alexei Andrews, well, I'm not even going to try that. Those are journalists. I could care less. Those are propagandists, but let's not be like that. I don't care. I'm going there if I see them. Let's not kill anybody. You're threatening people on our program. That's right, I am. So what? So what? Now, I don't know about y'all, but I think that's a little crazy. You know, this is about the normal Russian sentiment. And of course, they're running this thing as a show, much like some American news as entertainment by and large. But when in the world did it fall into the entertainment sector to threaten people with death in a foreign country and say, we will kill every single one of y'all? What the guy's literally saying is that we're going to commit genocide against the Germans. Or really anyone for that matter in the West. It just doesn't extend to the Germans. It also extends to the Norwegians, the French, the Americans, the British. This guy, much like the rest of the panel, although they're trying to act like they're mightier than thou, they all want to come over here and kill every single one of us if they could. This guy makes it pretty clear. Now, one thing that's interesting to me is that he says, I would go over there and kill all of you. Well, he's got a pretty good option, well, a pretty good chance to do that right now to the Ukrainians. How come he's not on the front lines like he says he would be? How come? Does anyone notice that he's sitting here in Moscow in the comfort of probably a mega million mansion, of course being sanctioned and favored by the Russian government to come up here and act a fool? How come he isn't on the front lines fighting alongside the Russian army right now, if he's so willing and determined to kill every single German there is? Or every single Ukrainian or German journalist for that matter. Note that hypocrisy right there, because if you say something like that, why not be there right now? And that gives you a good idea that this guy is just full of BS. But once again, I wanted to show you what's going on Russian state TV, because the insanity is impalpable. It's insane, to be honest. With that, we're now going to be moving out of the Russian news. Thank God there wasn't a lot of it, and we're not really going to talk about that too much rather than it was insane. And we're now going to be moving down into the location unknowns and covering those as well. And we actually have some really interesting ones today. Starting off, when you see some Russians being hit by the Ukrainian TDFs. Also, according to the caption, here's the story. So apparently, this Ukrainian unit that's inside this bunker flew off a drone, just pretty much for fun to see what was out there. And they found a Russian unit just a couple of 100 yards in front of them in the tree line. And so they called in artillery on them, and the Russians have pretty much no idea that the Ukrainians are right here watching the artillery rain down on them. And so, with that context in mind, here's the video. So pretty nice hit. We don't know if it actually did hit the Russians, but it was only a couple of 100 yards in front of this little bunker, and I bet you that those Ukrainians were feeling very fortunate that drones have become a major part of the Ukrainian military and that they were able to see these Russians before they got onto their bunker and into a firefight. With that, we're now going to be moving on into the next bit of location unknown news, where we can see a pretty lengthy video of Ukrainian forces on the front lines. And so, here's the video. Let me try and get that audio turned up a little bit. It does sound like it has music in it, though. See Ukrainian firing an RPG, and unfortunately we will have to mute this. We now see them walking alongside a road with the RPG again. Looks like we got the Ukrainian ram sheet here. They're just walking along the side of this road. A burning vehicle is just right in front of them, and that may have been the one they hit with the RPG, although I'm not entirely sure. But it does look a little fresh from here. And so with that, that's the end of the video, and then it begins to loop. Pretty neat to see that the Ukrainian Territorial Defense Forces are still at it again. And another really cool thing is that over the course of this war, we saw the TDFs go from pretty much an armed militia, or I guess you could say armed citizenry, and now they look about as professional and well-equipped as their actual regular army counterparts, which is a huge testament to the amount of supplies and support that the West has been giving Ukraine, because while we've always been focusing on the heavy artillery and other kinds of big-ticket weapons recently, it does have to be noted that a lot of countries have supplied small arms, protective gear, and I guess you could say textiles by and large for the Ukrainian infantry. And without it, the TDFs wouldn't look as well put together and as smartly turned out as they are right now. And so with that, we're now going to move on to the next bit of location unknown news, where we can see the Russians taking a closer look. Now, this one I know is copyrighted, but to get the full effect of this video, gotta play the copyrighted music. And so, with that, let me make sure that we got this at the highest quality setting, because y'all have got to see this silliness here. So, what we're about to see is some Russians going through what they say is a liberated Ukrainian position that they have pushed the Ukrainians out of. Of course, I'm paraphrasing what the Russians are saying in the video, and they're showing, look, there's the Ukrainians there, you know, and pretty much acting like, look, we pushed them out like cowards. We're so cool. We're so strong. We're the Russian army. But the video ends with them taking a really close look at what the Ukrainians may have really left behind. So here's the video. We can see a trench right there that was left by the Ukrainians, as they may say. We now see them going and taking a closer look at everything else around the area. Don't think they were going to be taking a closer look at much anything else. In fact, it looks like they were taking so little of a close look. And notice this at the beginning. These two guys are out in front of them. And they didn't notice that they were literally walking just, feet, maybe even less than a foot, just inches away from a mine on that path. And the third guy in the line actually steps on it. Yikes. That's not exactly great. And I think that they need to take a closer look at what they're walking through, because once again, the Russians have never learned. You would think that they would look where they're walking. You would think. But they don't. And even if that is a liberated Ukrainian trench, it looks like they were still practicing putting some hard turns and corners in the trench. And if you look at a Russian one, they still don't do that. So with that, we're now going to be moving on to the next bit of location unknown news. After that little bit of a literal bombshell. And we're going to see something interesting. And before we move on to this, let's talk about something that Amnesty International said. I actually found the little statement that they made about Ukraine. Ukrainians are fighting in civilian areas, which endangers civilians, which is such an interesting article. Let's read this for a second real quick, because I would like y'all to see what Amnesty International says, because they are totally right. There's no way we can argue against this. And so let me read it to y'all. Ukrainian forces have put civilians in harm's way by establishing bases and operating weapons systems in populated residential areas, including in schools and hospitals, as they repelled the Russian invasion that began in February, Amnesty International said today. And this is on the Amnesty website. Such tactics violate international humanitarian law and endanger civilians, as they turn civilian objects into military targets. The ensuing Russian strikes in populated areas have killed civilians and destroyed civilian infrastructure, and it's all Ukraine's fault that this is happening. And I would have to say they make an excellent point. It's not like they're fighting a war to defend their country and the existence of it. They ought to just keep on backing up until there's no civilians that are on the front line, because the country just doesn't even exist anymore. We have documented a pattern, Amnesty International says, of Ukrainian forces putting civilians at risk and violating the laws of war when they operate in populated areas, says Agnes Kalamard, Amnesty International Secretary General. Being in a defensive position does not exempt the Ukrainian military from respecting international humanitarian law. Are y'all noticing that this is being unfairly put against the Ukrainians, like it's their fault that the Russians are targeting Ukrainian cities? What about the Ukrainian cities like Lviv that we've been seeing targeted ever since the beginning of the war by cruise missiles and ballistic missiles that literally slam into apartment blocks for no other reason than to just do it? Is that also Ukraine's fault as well? Not every Russian attack documented by Amnesty International followed this pattern. However, in certain other locations in which Amnesty International concluded that Russia had committed war crimes, including in some areas of the city of Kharkiv, the organization did not find evidence of Ukrainian forces located in the civilian areas unlawfully targeted by the Russian military. Well, my question is, how in the world are they attached with the Ukrainian frontline units to see where they are, to actually see if they're being struck? Where are they getting that kind of information? Because I know that they don't have that many people on the ground, that they're keeping an eye on every single Ukrainian soldier and unit and where they are. And on top of that, if the Russians push into a city like Kharkiv, what is Ukraine supposed to do? Literally retreat out of the city and lose the battle for that city? It doesn't make a lot of sense. But anyways, I wanted to sit here and read this to y'all because they have a great point, because the Russians have never put their military infrastructure inside of civilian areas. They never have. I mean, this picture here of Russians hiding under an apartment block with all of their vehicles, as we can see right here, totally made up. It's not like they literally put 4 BMD-4s under the base of an apartment building. The Russians would never stoop that low to do such a thing. It's only the Ukrainians. It's not like these Vs clearly denote them as Russian. These are in fact Ukrainian vehicles. On top of that, it's not like the Russians are, roaming around towns and stuff like that and making sure to make civilian infrastructure there a target. I mean, like, look at these Russians inside of this house. I mean, they're definitely not putting civilians at danger. It's only the Ukrainians. These guys are just enjoying a picnic out in the woods. This is definitely not a Ukrainian citizen's house. We can even see a little Ukrainian flag up there in the corner, and that means absolutely nothing, according to Amnesty International. And that's kind of crazy. And I think it's about time that everyone makes sure to not support Amnesty International, and I'm glad that we've never run a fundraiser for them, seeing what they've said now. Is completely baseless, because everything they're claiming that the Ukrainians are doing, the Russians have clearly been doing, and we even got 2 pictures alone over the past 24 hours to show this exact kind of behavior being perpetrated by Russian infantry. And on top of that, I don't really think there is rules of war out there that pretty much ban you from fighting in urban areas, because as far as I can remember, every single war that's been fought throughout the course of history has had urban battles occur within them. For example, in the U.S. invasion of Iraq, there was the Battle of Fallujah, there was the Battle of Basra, there was the Battle of Baghdad, there was a whole bunch of battles that occurred in major cities. In the Chechen Wars, the Russians fought through the city of Grozny not once but twice in both wars. In the current war, we've seen fights occur in the middle of cities. In Kharkiv, if it wasn't for the Ukrainian defense, Kharkiv would have been lost. And so I don't know what the hell kind of international law they're basing this statement off of, because urban warfare is pretty much the basis of modern war. Urban areas make up the majority of where people live, and because of that, they are strategically important. And so battles will be fought in the cities over who will control them. And so I don't know why they're making these kinds of statements. And on top of that, couldn't they say that the Russians themselves are violating international law by pushing into these cities and putting the Ukrainians at risk of being in the middle of a firefight? Because the Ukrainians aren't the ones that are advancing onto the Russians in these situations. It's the Russians advancing into these cities onto the Ukrainians to put them in the line of fire. Honestly, I've got to say, Amnesty International with this kind of statement is completely unfounded. It's unbased, and they're trying to slander the Ukrainians with things that the Russians literally do day in and day out, and they sit here and smile and laugh about it, because Amnesty International is never going to make a direct statement or write a massive article like they did about the Ukrainians on what they're doing. And so, make sure that if you support any nonprofits in the war from now on, make sure it's not Amnesty International, because beyond them being largely useless, they also say stupid stuff that doesn't make any sense, like they've said today. And so with that, we're now going to be moving on to our last bit of news, which is actually a really cool piece of news. And as a history geek and a history buff, I found this to be incredibly interesting. Apparently, just today, a Scythian golden Goritos was found in Ukraine with scenes of the Accolade epic, which would only be written in writing 500 years after this tablet was made. And it has some incredible workmanship on it. If y'all don't know much about the Scythians are kind of a proto-Slavic culture that existed largely in the same area as Ukraine and Russia in the modern day. And they were incredibly interesting. If you want to, make sure to read up on them. But I've got to say, this is some impressive artwork on this tablet. I mean, like, really. Considering the time that the Scythians were around, if we pull it up real quick, let me just make sure I got the correct date. The Scythian Empire. Scythian Empire existed around the from 1 BC to the 2nd century AD. Well, the 1st century BC to the 2nd century AD. So this culture existed around the same time as, I guess you could say, the peak of the Roman Empire. And they were still creating interesting artwork like this, with this kind of level of detail and craftsmanship in it, which is honestly impressive. You would think, beyond the Chinese and the Romans at that time, that everyone else around the world wasn't really into arts or anything like that, but based off of this tablet, and also how much gold it's made out of, they really did an impressive job, and I have to say, quite a historic find in this war, and a pretty high note to end the Location Unknown news off of. So with that, we're now going to be moving on to the Kharkiv news and also the Donbass news, which is our next segment of the news for the night. But before we get there, we're of course going to take a quick pause to address 3 questions from the chat, and after we answer those 3 questions, we'll then be moving on into the next segment of news, which will be the Kharkiv news as well as the Donbass news. And so with that, what do we got?
All right, so moving into the first question segment of the night. Up first, we have a $50 super chat from John Dameron, who does not put in a comment, but John, thank you very much for your support, and also, Enforcer's going to weigh in as well.
And of course, I always have to weigh in, and I have to thank you so much for helping this channel to keep on running. Without viewers like y'all, it wouldn't be possible, and I thank you so much for the support. I wish you had thrown in a comment, because I wish I could at least respond to something, but I thank you so much once again. Regardless of whether you put in a comment or not, I'm incredibly appreciative, and so thank you. With that, we are on to the next one.
And next up, we have another $50 super chat, this time from Chris Mack, who says the UN regulators are very concerned about the nuclear power plant. Russia won't allow inspections, no replacement equipment, and discuss its critical situation. So keep up the good work.
And thank you so much for the support, Chris Mack, and it's a very concerning situation for sure that's happening at the Enerhodar power plant. This isn't the first time that's been put in jeopardy, but this is certainly the closest it's gotten to a disaster. During the battle at Enerhodar, which occurred for a short while, they did land some artillery shells around the outside of the power plant, and there was a fire that broke out somewhere, but it wasn't directly on the plant, and also it didn't hit any high voltage lines. This time, apparently shells directly hit the power plant, and also they hit a high voltage line, so that makes it a lot more concerning this time around than the last time. But I do thank you so much for the support, Chris Mack. We're going to try and keep up the great work of reporting that if we could get any more information on it. Because, of course, much like the Russians did at Chernobyl, we're not getting a lot of public information right now about what exactly is going on here, or a lot of video evidence to back it up. So thank you once again. We're going to make sure to cover it. And also, I thank you very much for adding in that additional information about Russia not allowing in UN regulators to take a look at the power plant and make sure that it's in stable condition. That may let us know that there is a problem with the power plant that the Russians are trying to fix, and the radiation could already be, well, if the radiation was already spreading, it would be picked up on some kind of a Geiger counter out there somewhere. But still, it is concerning, and hopefully it doesn't devolve into a worse situation. And so with that, I thank you so much once again for the support, Chris Mack, and I hope that does address your comment. And with that, and also, real quick, I actually just forgot, you are a longtime Lee Spring Army member. You've been around forever, as far as I can remember. So thank you once again for being a longtime member of this Lee Spring Army and helping us to keep this thing going. And so with that, we're now going to move on to the final question of this segment, and then we're going to be moving into one of the highest activity areas in the war today, which is the Kharkiv area, and also the Donetsk area as well, which is the other, I guess you could say, high activity area of the war right now. And so with that, we are on to the final question of this segment.
And real quick, Enforcer, I want to address a poll I put up a short while ago, and the question was, if the Ukraine nuclear power plant were to suffer a meltdown, what should NATO's response be? 47% said trigger NATO Article 5, and real quick to address that option, it's a bit of a stretch to do that. However, it could be argued that Article 5 could be triggered if that nuclear power plant were to melt down, because its effects could affect countries nearby that are NATO countries, which could, sort of be deemed an attack on that country in an aspect. However, there is a debate to be had about that. It's a bit of a stretch, I will admit, but 47% of you said yes to that option, and also 14% said issue a stern statement, 30% said militarily secure the power plant, and 9% said do nothing. It's not our concern. So a very interesting poll. And Enforcer, what are your thoughts?
And I would have to say, I think it would be a little bit of a stretch to say that Article 5 could get involved, because we did see back during the Chernobyl disaster that radioactive particles flew over Norway, which has always been a NATO member, and we didn't see Article 5 get invoked then. So unfortunately, well, the situation has changed, though, when you think about it, because Romania is about as, well, Now, that's still a little bit of a stretch in a way, because while Romania is very close to the Zaporizhzhia power plant, it's still not as close as Chernobyl was to the Belarusian border. And then again, they were all part of the Soviet Union at the time, so it wasn't really like anything could be done against the other. Still, if
Although, in Forcer, I will add that to me personally, the situation was a little bit different because Chernobyl was unintentional, and this was intentional by the Russians. So the outcome of this would be a direct effect of the Russians' actions in the war.
that is actually a pretty good point, and that does add a little bit of another layer to it. But then again, it's really hard to say if something like that that's indirect could actually be deliberate, because if this thing explodes, well, if it does explode and starts to leak radiation like Chernobyl did, this radiation could go anywhere. It's not going to always go west, because the winds do change per day. If you ever look at the Chernobyl disaster or Fukushima, when the radiation was leaking at an incredibly high rate, the radiation plume could change directions. Most of Chernobyl's radiation traveled north and west in a way. It kind of, I guess you could say, flowed upwards from where my mouse cursor is, and then started to flow kind of like north and west. Eventually flew over the Baltic states, then over Sweden and Stockholm, over Norway, and then it came back down onto Scotland, and then it started to flow across the Atlantic Ocean and largely dissipated before it got to the United States in a, I guess you could say, potent form. Well, at least a less potent, well, more potent form than what was experienced over the rest of Europe. So if this power plant was to explode and the fallout was to start to travel, this stuff could start traveling into Russia. Then the next day, it could start traveling into the Black Sea and over Georgia. And then after that, it might travel over Moldova. And the currents might not even take it into a NATO country. And so it's really hard to say if that would lead to Article 5 being invoked, because everyone could be equally affected. I'm not entirely sure. But then again, it is a solid point that if it is being attacked deliberately, which it is, and that radiation plume was to travel into Romania or Poland and cause significant problems there, like, for example, if the radioactivity was so high that a large area had to be evacuated, which is incredibly unlikely because the plume would be so far stretched at that point, I would consider serious action taken against the Russians for that reason. They knew it was a nuclear power plant when they called in the artillery barrages, and they still ended up hitting it again. So in that regard, I think that Article 5 is a pretty solid argument there, and a lot of y'all are saying that Article 5 should be triggered by NATO if that does happen. Issue a stern statement. 13% of y'all were for that. That was the second to last best option given out of the four. Which
And that's a good favorite of the politicians. Issue a stern statement that always solves everything.
yes, Matthew's on top of the ball tonight. That's always what the politicians do. Militarily secure the power plant. That was the second highest option for the night, and that one may as well be triggering Article 5 of the NATO Charter, because you would pretty much have to be taking military action at that point, which, if done by the entirety of the NATO coalition, would have to have Article 5 invoked to do something like that. And then 10% said do nothing, not our concern. And, I still do think it is our concern, especially if it is damaging our allies in Europe. And I know that a lot of people act like allies are not that important of a thing. That's something that is, by and large, normal attitude in a lot of countries, is that, they may be our allies, but who really cares? But when you're playing the game, the world game, where you're playing the strategy side of things, you always have to make sure to take up for your allies, because if you don't take up for them, what are you really? Are you an ally of them, or are you just some kind of a neutral party? You always have to make sure to act on the best interests of your allies, or they may leave you behind. In fact, they may not even treat you like an ally in the future. So with that, I hope that does address the poll, and I would largely have to agree. Out of all of the options given, I would say that our triggering Article 5 of NATO, if the radiation and the fallout was to travel into a NATO country, would be the thing I would most likely go for. And so with that, I think we've answered all of the questions. Do we have one more left?
We actually have one more to go before we round out the segment, and this one is from Kaltenberg, who puts in a $20 donation and says, "Howdy."
And howdy, Kaltenberg, and welcome back to the stream. You're here every single night, and I thank you so much for the support. And, of course, howdy. I just saw someone, I would like to address this real quick. RC said allies not important. I was actually saying that allies are very important, and you should always make sure to take care of them, because if you don't take care of them, are you really their ally or not? And so with that, we're now going to be moving on into the next segment of news, which will be the Kharkiv area and the Donbass. We didn't really get any news from the Seversk Finger or the Cave Monastery or Slavyansk or Bakhmut for that matter today. It seems like that area has largely fallen silent, at least as far as video evidence is concerned. But we're going to continue to truck on to the most heavily active area on the front line right now, which is the Kharkiv front. Unbelievably, massive amount of news has come out today. We've seen the Ukrainians take some losses. We've seen the Russians take some considerable losses of some of their more modern main battle tanks today, and it appears that fighting may have picked up heavily, at least for today. And depending on what we get tomorrow, we may see that either the Russians or the Ukrainians have begun some kind of offensive in this area. But to start off our news, somewhat on a low note, we can see the Russians hitting Ukrainian forces on film. Here we can see the Russian mortar crew firing off their mortars. This is sped up footage. And then we can see the mortar fire coming down. And while we may not see the Ukrainians on film exactly, we will see in a second that the Russians actually kept the drone around long enough to see a Ukrainian, I guess you could say casualty. We don't know if he was fatally wounded or just got a flesh wound or something like that, but we could see him being pulled out of the area. Somewhat unfortunate, but this loss of a Ukrainian soldier was not in vain today and did not go unpunished. As we'll see along the rest of the front line, Ukrainian Su-25s came roaring into the area today, 2 of them at an incredibly low altitude, to fly off and attack the Russians. And so here's the video. You see them flying off, and more Su-25s flying over. And that's the end of the video. We also then saw additional footage today of a T-90 getting hit and exploding. We have not seen a T-90 destroyed in this war for a long time, and so it's a welcome sight to see that a T-90 was knocked out. And so here's the video. We can see the T-90 smoking and burning. It appears that all the hatches are open, and so the crew has already bailed out of the vehicle. But as we all know, that never stops a Russian tank from having a barbecue. And this one looks like it literally blew out of every single end. It actually looks like the welding came apart and the front glacis just went flying off the tank and the fireball came with it. Because you can see that an explosion came straight out of the front of the tank, straight out of the rear in the engine bay, and straight out of both sides. Actually, it's really interesting because you can actually see that the explosions weren't really at the hard angles of the vehicle. They came out of the flat parts of the vehicle, which, if I remember correctly, I think those would be the path of least resistance in terms of physics. I'm not really a big physics person, though. But still, it's interesting to see how the explosion actually occurred, and that the fireball was massive. It looks like the explosion was so big, we didn't even get a turret toss. It literally just vaporized the turret. And now we see the white smoke of death. Usually when a vehicle gets destroyed, it's the black smoke of death. But this one went up in such a ball of flame that it's not even black smoke, it's white smoke, because all of the ammunition is what caused that explosion. So, also, that's an interesting thing. You can see when a vehicle burns out from some kind of an engine fire or a fuel fire versus an ammunition fire, because it still follows the rule of ammunition. It usually billows out white smoke, and gas and other kinds of engine components are always billowing out black smoke, including the stuff that some of the things inside of the tank are made out of, like the foam and the seats. With that, we're now going to be moving on to the next bit of news, where we've actually seen a Wait a minute. Oh, man. Are you kidding me? Wait a minute. Did I get the same video here twice? Because they were supposed to be... Dang it. I think I got the same one twice. Yeah. Let me see about this one. Man, dang it. You see, the thing is that I had video evidence today. Apparently, the link copied itself. But one of these was a T-80U. And so apparently the links got messed up. But we were going to see a T-80U get destroyed in pretty much the exact same fashion. And it was actually pretty impressive as well. But sadly, I don't have that video. Apparently the links got mixed up or messed up when I was putting these down. And sometimes Google My Maps, whenever I click the refresh button at the top corner, sometimes it just does wonky stuff, and sometimes it messes with the links. And so with that, we're now going to be moving on to the last bit of Frontline news that we've gotten today. We're going to see the Ukrainians destroying the Scooby-Doo van. I don't think Scooby-Doo and Scrappy, no one remembers Scrappy, no one likes Scrappy, but I don't think they will be solving any more mysteries as the Ukrainians put a stop to the Russian Scooby-Doo team on discovering anything new. When you see here the Scooby-Doo van sitting down there, and it got slammed by a bomblet. We now see that the entire back of the vehicle has been caved in on the roof. And we see that the mystery van is no longer. And the Russians are going to have a little bit of a mystery as to how they got a sunroof in the back of the vehicle. We can now see the bomblet being dropped again, and the video loops. It's nice to see that they were able to knock out one of the Russian Scooby-Doo vehicles, and of course, it's not really a massive loss. These things are actually fairly cheap, but it's always interesting to see that a drone that cost a couple of $100 with a bomblet that probably cost $12 to make is able to knock out a $30,000, well, probably not a $30,000, I'd say more like a $14,000 van. Still, very cost efficient in what it's destroying, and the Russians are not going to have a way to get back off that front line. And so, with that, we're now going to be moving out of the Kharkiv front line, and we're now going to be moving into the city of Kharkiv before we discuss what's going on in the entire area, where we're going to see a flag waver in Kharkiv. It looks like this person is in some kind of an electric wheelchair. I'm not exactly sure, but they have a Ukrainian flag on the back of the wheelchair, and it's actually pretty cool to see. So here's the video. It pretty much speaks for itself. You see him taking off. It's nice to see that Ukrainian patriotism is still strong in Kharkiv, even after all they've gone through. So with that, let's now talk about what's going on in this entire area. We've gotten a lot of video evidence today, and it's showing a large amount of activity, especially compared to weeks prior. We've never gotten this much activity on a single day, even when we're covering the Monday and Tuesday news in a single stream. This is suggesting that something is happening in this area. We're not sure if the Ukrainians are conducting an offensive or if the Russians are conducting an offensive, but we will be keeping an eye on this because this amount of activity has to be suggesting that something has happened today, leading to this kind of involvement by both sides. The Ukrainians, as far as video evidence is concerned, came out on top, inflicting the most damage monetarily and in terms of force. And it seems like the Russians, on video, were only able to claim maybe one Ukrainian casualty, and we're not even sure if he was killed. He may have just been wounded. Hopefully he was only wounded, because I hate to think that sometimes, although it is a war and this will happen, that Ukrainian soldiers are, of course, ending up passing away on the front lines. With that, we're now going to be moving out of the Kharkiv area, and we're now going to be moving past the Chuiv and Balaklia area as well, so we haven't got any news to report of in those areas. It's once again been quiet. But down near the Izium area, we have seen, and now here's the video, the T-80U being knocked out of action. Apparently, earlier I thought that was in the Kharkiv area, but it was actually knocked out by the 93rd Brigade. And so, my fault. Let's watch this video and see this T-80U, which looks like it's already been detracked and the crew has already bailed out, being destroyed. So we're taking a good little look at this T-80U here, and we all know what's about to happen. It's about to become a T-80U non-existent, or a T-80BF, which means bonfire. Actually, hang on. Let me make sure the video went all the way through. We see the drone backing off. And it looks like they were just showing us the after effect of the tank being destroyed, apparently. We can see this detract. It doesn't look like it's got any burn damage, but the crew has bailed. And considering that it was detracked, crews usually do not have the time in a combat situation to actually hop out and pull out all the gear and connect the track links together. Apparently, I remembered this video a little bit incorrectly too. Sorry, everyone. It has been a little bit of a blur making the news today. For some reason, it just felt like it took forever. But still, it's great to see that the Ukrainians were able to knock out a T-80U, and hopefully they're able to keep up these losses once more. Also, I'd like to make a huge note that this tank was knocked out by the 93rd Brigade. Again, the 93rd Brigade has made a huge name for themselves in this war. They've been knocking out Russian vehicles and units left and right, and they continue to keep up that kind of momentum. So great to see, and we have heard that there may be some kind of a small counterattack occurring in the Izium area, but we don't have any information about ground taken by the Ukrainians. With that, we're now going to be moving out of the area of Izium and past the Cave Monastery and also Slavyansk as well, and all the way around the Lysychansk Finger. We have nothing to report in this area today. We're now going to be moving past Bakhmut as well, and it's been eerily quiet in this area. Of course, in video evidence, we haven't seen anything happen today, and that may be reflective of this front line stalling once more. We're not really sure if that is the case. We may just be lacking video evidence for what's actually going on, but it's been eerily quiet today because every day of the week for months on end at this point, we've been getting news from this area, and today is the first day where absolutely nothing has come out in terms of news all the way from the cave monastery to Bakhmut. But down in the town of Toretsk, we did see a picture today of a pet store owner cleaning up the rubble in front of their shop and keeping their business open. These kinds of pictures remind me of the Blitz. If y'all remember, of course, the Germans were bombarding London among many other British cities, and the British, of course, in their typical fashion of keeping a stiff upper lip, just bared through it, kept their stores open, and kept everything running as best as they could. You can see a lot of pictures like these all the way back in 1940 when the British were suffering from the Blitz, and I have to say that it definitely shows the resolve of the Ukrainian citizenry as they continue to persevere against Russian attacks that are literally targeted at civilian infrastructure. And I bet you well that there were no Ukrainian units in this area whatsoever, and Amnesty International would say that the Ukrainians were at fault for this kind of attack. With that, we're now going to be moving beyond Toretsk to the next area, which has had the largest amount of activity recorded today, where we've seen in Donetsk, it appears that the Russians may be conducting more operations. But we also saw some video from the 25th Brigade. And so without further ado, I'm going to let y'all see this. There is speech-to-text translation as to what this guy is saying. And so in respect of these soldiers and how long they've been fighting on the front, I'm not going to interrupt him. I'm just going to let the video play and let y'all see what he has to say.
Підрозділ безпосередньо приймає участь в самих гарячіших точках на карті. З 24 лютого нашим підрозділом було вражено 29 повітряних цілей. З них це 15 літаків, 9 БПЛА та 9 вертольотів. Нещодавно президент у своєму вечірньому зверненні відзначив наших хлопців, які збили менше, ніж за одну добу, 2 Су-25 та 1 вертолет К-52.
Был налет 4 самолетов. Первых 2 зашло, 1 ушел, второй шел над посадкой. Я выстрелил, получается, в него. Ракета моя зашла снизу и, получается, повредила мотор ему. С первого выстрела, получается, подбил второй самолет, который заходил на село, которое мы как бы прикрывали.
Літаки ми збиваємо в основному з ПЗРК «Стінгер» та ПЗРК «Ігла». Літаки – це так звані Су-25 та Су-27.
Вступила команда, що над нами літає БПЛА типу «Орлан». Я вибіг, зробив пуск, збив його. Також «Стінгер» ефективний проти вертольотів, літаків. З даного озброєння «Стінгер» було збито 2 БПЛА типу «Орлан-10».
Да, наши зенитчики ДШВ имеют очень большой опыт. Их просят с других бригад, чтобы мы помогли обучить их ребят. И после, даже хватает 2-3 недель, и пацаны работают нормально, все четенько. Ну да, дальше продолжаем работать, конечно. По-другому никак.
And that's the end of the video, and some really interesting stories from these soldiers of the 25th Brigade. We can see that all of these soldiers here in the interview are involved in air defense, and we can see that they actually say that most of the aircraft shot down are either shot down by the Igla or the Stinger. Pretty interesting to see. Of course, they have some, I guess you could say, older anti-aircraft systems. We can see what appears to be 23mm guns mounted onto the an MTLB chassis. We've seen the Russians using these as well. They're fairly common, and if you look at any wars happening in the Middle East, you'll also see these exact kind of, I guess you could say, anti-aircraft guns being mounted onto trucks and all sorts of things, usually used in an anti-infantry role, which they're also really effective at. If you ever look at the stats, they're pretty good. Large autocannons firing at infantry usually equals some pretty interesting results. But still, it's really interesting to see that they have given credit to a lot of foreign-provided surface-to-air, well, man-pads, pretty much, for what they've been able to shoot down. And they also have a pretty interesting kill count, including a Ka-52 and an Su-25. with that, some pretty interesting news. I hope the 25th Brigade is able to keep up those kinds of air defenses, as they are what are keeping the skies clear over Ukraine, and they continue, along with the Ukrainian Air Force, to own the skies. With that, we're now going to be moving down to the area of Pisky, where we've seen that Ukrainian forces were shelled today by the Russians. Let's see if the Russians included music. They did not. That's a first for today. We see the artillery coming down near the trenches, but note, before the video begins even, notice that this trench looks straight, but when you look at it, it actually does have some decent breaks in it to make sure that there is not a long, continuous line like the Russians would have in their trenches. It shows intelligence amongst the enlisted. It also shows intelligence amongst the officers and the NCOs to make sure that the trenches are made this way. We don't see any Ukrainian soldiers in the trenches. We can see one actually slam down right there. And this is a great example of why having breaks in the trenches is important. Note, the artillery shell lands right where my mouse cursor is. There's a break here. There's a break here. If anyone was in that trench, only a few people may have been injured and killed, and everyone else down the lengths of the trenches would have just been unscathed. It cannot be stressed enough how important it is to make breaks in the trenches. We can now see some Ukrainians in this trench. It looks like they're trying to do something, I'm not exactly sure. We now see the artillery coming down once more. We now see some soldiers in the trenches. It appears that another round hit right behind the trench. Now, it looks like the Ukrainian soldiers are, of course, persevering through the artillery bombardment. Another shell landed just in front of the trench, but once again, not inside of it. We now see the soldiers moving around still in the trenches. And we see that they brought a stretcher showing that one of them has been wounded, and they're now loading him onto it. We see the soldier moving around his arms, and so we do know that he is okay. He may be wounded, but right now he is still alive, and hopefully will remain so. They've now gotten him onto the stretcher, and it looks like they're running him up to an MTLB, which will then take him out of the front, and hopefully to a hospital so that way he can get some treatment. So with that, that's the end of the video, and I do have to say that the Ukrainians continue to persevere and hold the lines against the Russians in this area, and while these artillery bombardments do reap a loss here and there for the Ukrainians, either they're wounded or killed, the Ukrainians never yield, and they still hold this front line, and as far as we know, the Russians have not been able to push the Ukrainians out of Pisky today, and most likely never will, as it's one of the most heavily defended areas of the entire country. With that, we're now going to be moving down to the area of Marinka, where we can actually see the DPR forces in action there. This is actually footage taken from a DPR soldier. It's a little lengthy, but let's get right into it and let's see what we see.
Заебись. Давай, подходи.
Принят. Подходить к вам.
Нет, пока будь на месте.
I see the guy's just sitting in a backyard. He's not really doing much.
Работай. Давай РПГ отработаем тоже. РПГ сюда. Пошли на угол пока с тобой.
Now see him moving around the house.
Да.
Так, зайди за это, если когда будет работать, осколки не будут лететь.
Да я понимаю, но хули делать.
And now moving forward. And now firing. Haven't heard any return fire yet. And until we hear a return fire, we're assuming that there's no Ukrainians in this video.
Третий день, да, третий дом справа. Вот это первый считается? Это первый, вот этот первый, второй, третий. Давай.
Oh, we just saw a fib. We just saw a fib. Look at this. He runs out with the RPG. He aims it. And then he gets scared. He doesn't fire it and he runs back.
Что? Красный. Осечка?
There's no return fire yet.
Пустой. РПГ.
We still hear no return fire. He's now running out with the RPG again. This time he fires it, then he comes running back. Still no return fire.
Выше? Чуть выше надо. Да, принял.
Возьми на 10 минут.
Сейчас не...
На 10 минут право, 10 минут право.
У меня что, выше? Пока сюда! Пулемет сюда!
Still hear no return fire. We've been here for 3 minutes and 17 seconds. No return fire.
Блядь, пулемет сюда! Ебать его в рот.
Еще чуть выше.
Попробуй другой дом отработать дальше. Смотри.
It now seems that they are having a group meeting in the middle of the front lines. Conference meetings and conference calls are of course incredibly important, even in the middle of what the Russians are trying to show as a pitched firefight. Right now they're trying to talk about their stocks, their futures, and their dividends that they will most likely be making in profits off of the stupid decision that they're about to make. Of course, the Russians are not good at math. They are calculating that they will have an advantage over the Ukrainians if they do run into them in a firefight, and they have decided that the best risk to take would be to make their presence known and fire into the distance, assuming that Ukrainians are somewhere down there, and hopefully hit them. Of course, we know that the returns on this kind of investment are incredibly low and have given away their location to the Ukrainians, which, if in the area, are most likely using a drone to find out exactly where they are, and then they will be calling in artillery soon. Once again, a bad trade by and large, and I think that this conference meeting could have been avoided and they could have just sent this over email.
Работает РПГ, ты начинаешь работать длинными очередями. Выбегает РПГ,
They're still having a conference meeting, interestingly enough.
Пошел, длинными очередями. РПГ пошел. Надо перейти.
They're really laying down the fire, but once again, no return fire. Now they've cut the footage. Now it's sometime in the future.
Ай? Перешел? Заебись. Так.
They're now sitting around thinking about the bad decisions they've made in life, and why in the world did they ever enlist in the Russian military in the first place? That I cannot answer. We now see one of them has pulled out some hearing protection, I'm assuming, or some kind of headset.
Давай. Почему нет? Нахуй нам РП, если оно не работает.
Hear a little bit of sporadic fire. They're now having another committee meeting. You know, what they need to do is they need to have a committee meeting with the homeowners association, because I'm sure they're going to have a lot of gripes and complaints about them violating the statutes of the HOA and making these houses look the way they did. Hopefully the Ukrainian military, which is the enforcement agency for this homeowners association, will be raining down the fire on the Russians soon, so that way the HOA doesn't have to speak to them. Still having a little bit of a conversation. Not a lot of action here. These guys are about the slowest moving unit I've seen in the war. We now see him finally take a step, and now he's crouched. These are big moves by the Russians, war-winning decisions.
Подожди. Да, я понял.
He's now getting back up again, and I think we're gonna... There's a little bit of a firefight going on again. Not really a firefight, more like them just shooting into the distance once more. No return fire.
Круто.
These guys move like World War II veterans if they were to go into war, and not to make any marks against them. They were impressive and wonderful people. Knew a decent amount of them, but right now, at their age, considering that a lot of them are in their late 90s, I bet you they could move faster than these guys right here. These are the slowest Russian soldiers I've ever seen. They did nothing in this video, and this is what they made of note in the Marinka area. If this is the only video they have to show for today, imagine what other Russian units looked like. They must have been literally standing still for an hour. With that, we're now going to be moving on to the final bit of news that we've gotten from the Donetsk region today, which is in Makivka, where we can see that the Ukrainians apparently have struck a target there. We're not sure if it's an ammo depot or some kind of a Russian base, but we can see the explosions in the distance. We can see a fire. It looks like thick black smoke, so maybe some kind of a fuel silo. Hear a little bit of whistling there. Nice little churning fire. It hasn't turned into a massive explosion yet, so I think it may be gas, or some kind of oil. Still, great to see that the Ukrainians have struck another target, because each logistics hub destroyed is putting the Russians in an even worse position along the rest of the front. With that, we have now covered all the Donetsk news, and before we move into our final segment for the night, which will include the Southern Front news, the news from Israel, the international news we have for the night, and also the speech from President Zelensky, we're going to take a quick pause for a minute to answer 3 questions from the chat, and after we answer those 3 questions, we'll then move on into our final news segment for the night. And so with that, what do we got, Matthew?
All right. And real quick, let me restructure my spreadsheet because I got a last-minute super chat in there. So up first, we have a $24 super chat from Dieter Herford, who says, "Have a nice dinner on me."
Well, thank you so much, Herford, for the support. And we are going to have a nice dinner on you. We have a decent amount of options in our area. Surprisingly, we were looking through them today. And I have to say, if y'all have if y'all have anywhere around y'all that serves any kind of Cajun food, I had not had alligator meat until about 2 days ago, I think, and it was delicious. I was honestly really surprised that alligator tasted good, and what my logic was when I ordered it, I was like, well, if it's on the menu, it must be good. Someone is out there buying it for them to keep this in stock, so I guess I'll get some. And I tried it, and honestly, I was really blown away. Alligator meat is really good, and I think I've become a fan of that now. And so, I'm going to use that super chat to go buy myself some more alligator meat and eat a little bit more, because honestly, I gotta say, I've just become a huge fan of it. And so with that, we are going to move on to the next one, and I thank you so much once again for the support.
And real quick, we have one more poll to address. This time the question was, are the Russians the most irresponsible people when it comes to nuclear power? 80% of you said yes, they caused many disasters. 12% said somewhat, and 9% said no, there are equally bad ones. And I will say that Chernobyl is one of the worst in history. Everybody knows that. I saw some in the live chat saying that the Japan nuclear disaster at Fukushima was equally as bad. And yes, it was quite bad. However, the Chernobyl disaster was due to incompetence, and the Fukushima disaster was due to a design flaw that was made worse when that tsunami hit, and it eventually caused the meltdown that happened. So, Enforcer, do you have any thoughts you want to share on that?
Yes, and I'll actually have to correct something there real quick. The Fukushima nuclear power plant disaster was, by and large, from incompetence, due to how they designed the power plant, and also a lot of safety regulations that I believe it is the TEPCO the TEPCO Power Company overlooked. That was what caused the disaster. There was also a lot of safety concerns and violations that had occurred over Fukushima's history. So it was largely caused by incompetence as well. But in terms of numbers, to crunch the numbers, the Fukushima power plant disaster was pretty bad, but it was not as bad as Chernobyl by people displaced by that number. There was more people displaced by the Chernobyl disaster than there were in the Fukushima disaster, surprisingly enough, although Japan has a much higher population density than Belarus or Ukraine. So with that, I hope that does address that really quick, and also to actually address the poll. It is pretty interesting to me that a lot of people did say 78% said yes, they have caused many disasters, and one that never gets any attention, and I believe that it should, is the Chelyabinsk, I guess you could say, disaster. It was kind of a accumulation of multiple things that the Russians did in that area. Chelyabinsk disaster. This one's one that not really a lot of people talk about. It's called the Kishtim disaster, but I call it the Chelyabinsk disaster. Pretty much, due to how the Russians were creating nuclear weapons at the time, they would take all of the waste and they would dump it into nearby lakes because, you know, you can't be Russian without being incompetent, and so they have to do something stupid. And so they dumped it into lakes nearby. And after a while, this stuff started to make a little bit of a problem. In fact, it got so bad that most of the lakes were so highly irradiated that everything coming out of them was practically going to kill someone eventually through some kind of radiological illness. And so what the Russians did is that they went down into the area after it got radiated enough, they took everyone out, executed all of the animals, they spread the people out far and wide, they treated them like they were contaminated with some kind of a bubonic plague, and the whole entire area became unlivable. You can actually see the spread of the radiation here. And if we go to a normal map, like Google Maps, we'll type in Russia, Google Maps. But we know that this is just outside of Yekaterinburg, so this gives us a good idea of a starting point. So there's Yekaterinburg. We can probably find Chelyabinsk around it. Right there, there's Chelyabinsk. And let's look at this map. So Chelyabinsk is down there, so the radioactive plumes came from the area around Ozursk, I believe. Must have been incredibly close. Yes, it was. So Ozursk is right there. So it happened around somewhere in here. And of course, this area is largely unpopulated. And you can even see what appears to be the remnants of some abandoned buildings, which are, I guess, part of the Kishtim disaster. Anyways, the entire area was abandoned. The Russians caused a massive radiological disaster, and pretty much this was the very first, I guess you could say, nuclear incident in the world of sizable proportion. And of course, some people say that 3 Mile Island occurred in the United States, but 3 Mile Island isn't even comparable. That was a partial meltdown that was contained within the, I guess you could say, containment building, and it didn't really affect anyone outside of the power plant. I think 2 or 3 people may have been highly irradiated or killed from the disaster, but compared to Chernobyl and how many people were killed directly by the radiation and how many people got radiological illnesses afterwards, also compared to Fukushima, 3 Mile Island doesn't even pale in comparison to what the Russians have done multiple times with nuclear technology, or atomic technology, if you'd like to call it that. And so I would have to agree with everyone on that poll that certainly the Russians should not be trusted with nuclear power or nuclear weapons, because they are by far the most irresponsible when it comes to it. In fact, a lot of y'all may remember the Tsar Bomb as well, which was Russia's attempt at producing the largest nuclear weapon on Earth. And the Tsar Bomb actually had to be reduced in size by half because the Soviet Union, as a show of force, were about to build a nuclear bomb so big that Russian scientists theorized that the explosion of it alone could actually crack the Earth's crust. And so the Tsar Bomb was actually reduced in size by half. So that gives you an idea of how incompetent the Russians are, is that they were about to literally crack the crust of the Earth just to try and send a message. So with that, I hope that does address the poll there, because I would have to agree with 78% of y'all, the overwhelming majority, that they are very irresponsible with nuclear technology. And with that, we are now on to the first question.
And next up, we have a $25 super chat from Redwood Beard, who says, I have to wonder if the Russians are on pervidi or something to shoot randomly.
Can you spell out pervidi for me real quick?
I think he meant to say Pervitin, but I think his letters got a little mixed up.
Oh, okay. So can you reread that whole thing for me real quick and replace that with Pervitin?
And yes, he said, I have to wonder if the Russians are on Pervitin or something to shoot randomly.
You know, I would have to say no, because if they were on Pervitin, they would have moved faster than what they were doing in that video. So, no, I would have to say, in my opinion, no, because I mean, like, think about it. If they were on Pervitin, they would be moving around a lot, because I would think it was Simon Haya, the Finnish sniper who took Pervitin, or someone. I don't think it was him, actually. I think it was some other Finnish soldier. But they literally could not stop moving, and those Russian soldiers looked like they could never start moving. And so with that, I hope that does address the comment. I thank you so much for the support, and it is a pretty good and interesting observation. And amphetamines, by and large, have been used in war ever since their inception around the turn of the 20th century. Well, I guess you could say, well, yeah, around the turn of the 20th century, I guess would be the best way to say it. And so with that, thank you so much once again for the support. I hope that does address the comment. And a pretty interesting observation, but I hope you see where I'm coming from as well. I do see where you're coming from, though. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And next up, we have a $20 super chat from BC Skyman, who says, very good news. Roy and his team and several Ukrainian platoons have made big gains near Izium.
Well, thank you so much for the support, BC, and it's good to hear that progress is being made near Izium. Of course, we're waiting for video evidence or official reports to say what has been taken, because we haven't really seen a lot of that at this point, but we have been hearing that ground has been made near the Izium area, and hopefully eventually we'll see the Ukrainians fighting in the streets of Izium and eventually pushing the Russians all the way out of it. But with that, I thank you so much for the support, and I hope that your friends and also your wife's friends in Ukraine stay okay, they're able to make it through this war, and that in the end, Ukraine will win, and that all of the hard work that they've put into defending the country will be worthwhile, because Ukraine will still stand at the end of this war. And so with that, thank you so much once again for the support, BC Skyman, and I thank you so much for being a long-time Lee Spring Army member and helping us to keep this channel running for a long time. We, of course, rely on the viewers' support, and just to go through this little speech real quick to everyone, we rely on the viewers' support. We've completely cut off ads. We've done this ever since the very beginning. Well, actually, take that back. We actually ran ads for a single day, and the reason why they were shut off is because I actually went to go watch one of my own streams on YouTube to see how the end result had actually turned out, and I had to go through 2 unskippable ads to watch my own stream, and that annoyed me so much I shut them off and never turned them on again, because I was thinking y'all are all having to go through that. Tens of thousands of people have to go through that every time they want to watch my stream, and so I just shut them off, because they were annoying to me, and I bet they were annoying to y'all. So this is the only way we're able to keep the channel running, and I've got to thank every single person who throws in the super chat, because y'all are what helps me to keep everything running behind the scenes, so that way I can sit down and do this every single day of the week, except for Mondays. And so with that, we are on to the next one, and thank you once again for the support, BC Skyman, and I hope that does address your comment fairly well.
And yes, folks, we really do appreciate your support. And also, if you want to, please feel free to click the like button as well, because basically that tells the YouTube algorithm it's a good video and they put it out for more people to see. So we appreciate all the support, plus hitting the like button. And with that being said, we are moving on to our next super chat, which is from Josh Parrish, who puts in a $20 donation and says, I feel that China and Russia were and are attempting to test our political climate, and we're trying to get the US as well as the rest of the West to overextend themselves so China can take advantage of our strain on our industry.
I thank you very much for the support, and that may be the strategy that they're taking, but it will not work. As we saw in the Second World War, even when the United States was just clawing its way out of the Great Depression, the United States was not only able to take on the Nazi Germans, but they were also able to take on the Japanese at the same time. And I know what a lot of people are about to say, oh, but y'all came in the war into 1944 on the beaches of Normandy. That's not true. That's just straight up false. We were in North Africa in 1942. We were in Italy in 1943. And then we ended up in France in 1944. And we were helping out. We were there with the British ever since 1942, pretty much, helping them to push the Germans back and stem the tide of the war and then turn it. And then at the same time, we were also fighting major naval battles in the Pacific and pushing the Japanese off of each and every single island until we eventually made it to Okinawa itself. And so with that, I hope that does answer the question in a way. And I do know what you're saying, and that may actually be their ploy and their strategy, but at the same time, it's a foolish one, because if we've seen anything from previous wars, like World War II, the United States can take on two fronts at a single time, and due to their geographic location, considering that they're on a pretty friendly continent, everyone's on decent terms with the United States here in North America, there's no threats to actually put us on edge. There's really no way for the Chinese or any of our adversaries around the world, unless they were using intercontinental ballistic missiles, to actually fire something from their home territory that can hit us. It will require submarines, a sizable navy that can get past the U.S. Navy, and that's just not really possible. And really, honestly, something that a lot of people don't talk about, the United States is blessed by its geographic location in the world. If it wasn't for the United States being on the North American continent, we would be a lot like the Europeans, where we have to be responding immediately to a situation with not a lot of time to build up and not a stable home front situation. The United States never had to go through the Blitz. They never had to go through the Germans 20 miles from Paris, because we are literally on the other side of the world. And so everything over here pretty much runs in a bubble. And that's very fortunate for us and the rest of the world, because anything can happen in Europe, and the United States could still be churning out the weapons, the aid, and the support to keep the entire thing running and largely be safe as long as the Navy is still there. And so with that, I hope that does address the comment, and I thank you so much for the support. Really interesting standpoint, and that may be the strategy they're going for. And with that, we are on to the final question of this segment, and after that, we'll be moving into our last bit of news.
All right, and the final question of this segment goes to Tedgar, who puts in a $20 donation and says Amnesty usually does a good job, but in this, they are wrong. Ruski influence maybe. Ukrainian Amnesty doesn't agree with this report. Greetings from Finland. I've been following you for a few months now, and keep up the good work.
And thank you so much for the support, and it's good to hear that we have viewers in Finland. I actually found out that I could find the analytics of how many views I've gotten per country just yesterday, and I've been looking at them today, and surprisingly enough, there are a lot of Finnish, Swedish, and Norwegian viewers who watch this stream, and so I got to thank you so much for the support. I knew that there was a lot of Norwegians viewing the stream, but I've always had it up in the air about Swedes and Finns and how many of them are watching the streams, but I do thank you so much for the support. And if you could, real quick, since I was just oogling about Finland, could you reread the first part of that super chat?
And yes, one moment. Let's see here. Tedgar said, Amnesty usually does a good job, but in this, they were wrong. Was it Ruski influence? Maybe. Ukrainian Amnesty does not agree with this report.
It may have been Russian influence. I actually saw, because I've been trying to read into this a little bit, someone said that Amnesty International actually decides which countries they're actually able to have some kind of sway on versus the other, and so they'll pretty much go on the attack on any country that they feel they have some kind of control over. And so in this war, they've pretty much decided that Ukraine is the country that they may have a little bit of control over, and so now they're going on the attack against them, saying that they're war criminals and they're committing all kinds of stuff and in the war. And then they'll sit there and actually say, the Russians bombarded these cities, and there may have not been Ukrainians in those cities, but it's the fault of the Ukrainians that the Russians are assuming that there are Ukrainian military forces in these cities for them to attack. And that's really just sickening in a way. And I know that the Ukrainian Amnesty office does not agree with them, but at the same time, they are a cadet branch of Amnesty International, and I think that the entire organization should pretty much just come to a close, or at least public support for it should. A stupid decision like that shows that that is definitely not an organization that one should support. Another organization, of course, can come up and take its place. I'm not saying that the world would be better off without organizations that do the things they do, but we would be a lot better off with Amnesty International, just to put my opinion out there, because they may advocate for you know, I guess you could say prisoners of war and such things like that. But if you make a stupid statement like that, imagine the biases that they're pretty much practicing in real life that we don't actually see. And so with that, I hope that does address the comment, and I thank you so much once again for the support. And I also say hello to everyone watching from Finland. If y'all would like, real quick, because I always find it really interesting where everyone's from, if you would like to tell us what country you're from, I would be incredibly interested to see. If you feel comfortable enough, you can also throw in your city. Do not throw in your personal address, like your street or your suburb. Just throw in the nearest big town you're close to, because I'm always interested in where everyone actually is in the world, and I always like to take a look and just wander around because I'm kind of curious like that. But with that, thank you so much once again for the support. I hope I was able to address that comment fairly well. And with that, I think that was actually our last question of that segment, wasn't it?
And it was.
All right, and so we're now going to be moving on to the final segment of news, which will be including the Southern Front, the 2 bits of news there, and then we'll be hopping down to Israel to cover a continuation of the Gaza conflict that we've been seeing unfold for the past 2 days. Now, real quick, let's actually see what the live chat's saying. We got Montreal, Darwin, we got Houston, Santa Rosa, New Mexico, North Carolina, Canada, Glasgow, Scotland. Neat. I've never been there. Want to go there, though. Sydney, that's neat. A lot of viewers are from Sydney. Washington, D.C., look at that. Utah, let's see, Halifax, Canada, neat. Halifax explosion, big piece of history. Let's see, Portland, Texas, Bristol in the UK, Hesse, Germany, really cool, really neat. Norwich, that's really cool. Finland, we've got some Finnish viewers. Lancashire in the United Kingdom. It's really cool to see where everyone's from. I love reading that kind of stuff. But with that, of course, we're going to have to move on. I love watching that. And if y'all would, make sure to throw it in near the question segment at the end of the stream, because during tonight's question segment, we may just go around and hop down on Street View in a town, in your hometown, if you call it out, and we'll just take a look at it just for the fun of it. And they just keep on coming in. We've got people from all over. Hong Kong, we got someone from Hong Kong. Neat. Very cool. Let's see, Western Colorado, Maine, Amsterdam. I'm sorry, I'm getting distracted by that. We're now going to move on to the Southern Front news. We haven't gotten a lot of it today, of course. The Southern Front is almost always quiet, but we did get a couple. We saw that the Russians were hit by the Azov Dnieper Battalion in the Southern Front today, which we saw here on the video. Of course, we got to mute it. When we see the drone looking around, when we see the artillery coming in, when you see the artillery slamming through the trees, and into Russian positions. We can now see that one of the Russians was wounded. And that's the end of the video. Pretty interesting to see. It looks like the artillery barrage only got 1 person, and we're not really sure if they're wounded or 200, as they say. But with that, we're now going to be moving to the area of Tokmak, and now the Frontline news itself, where we've seen that partisans have taken it upon themselves not only after the Ukrainian barrage destroyed the ammunition depot in the town, but they also destroyed a small segment of rail somewhere in what appears to be... Let's wait for a second. Let's actually go to Twitter real quick, so it'll pull up faster. It appears that they knocked out a rail in a rail yard, perhaps. It looks like there's several rails in the distance. And this kind of span being knocked out could pose a problem for a speeding freight train if one does happen to pass through. So a nice little job by the Ukrainian saboteurs. Not really sure what kind of explosive they used, but it did cause a decent amount of damage to the spar. It most likely could be replaced within a couple of hours or a day. So not serious damage, but if a passing train is not given a red signal and just blows right over that, that will spell disaster for that specific train. With that, we're now going to be moving out of the southern front, and we're now going to be moving across the seas into our international news today, which comes from Israel. As y'all may remember yesterday, the Gaza Strip lit up with some activity as MLRS rockets flew out of the area to land into the nearby Israeli towns of Ashkelon, if I remember how the pronunciation is. Now, I would like it to make it clear, because I actually did see a news article today, which was kind of interesting to me, that a news article said that the Israelis are attacking the Gazans, and I kind of found that weird because this whole entire confrontation, as we saw yesterday, began with an MLRS barrage from the Gaza Strip. So in terms of who's actually starting this kind of conflict, it's really the Gazans instead of the Israelis this time. Not getting into the politics here, but of course details matter, and trying to paint someone as the aggressor when they're responding in this particular scenario is just not true, and it's not really right. But we did see more rockets being launched from the Gaza Strip today, just a few hours ago. And so here's a video of those rockets taking flight out of the Gaza Strip and once again towards Israel a second night in a row.
Allahu Akbar!
And so that's the end of this video. We then saw that while these rockets were, of course, traveling over into Israel towards the town of Ashkelon, we saw that the Iron Dome did intercept a decent amount of these missiles. We actually have two videos showing this, which I'll show right here. And I gotta say, I don't know about you, Matthew, but this stuff looks like Star Wars.
Yeah, it's pretty wild.
Yeah, it's insane what the Iron Dome can do.
My question is, has the Iron Dome ever been overwhelmed where it cannot handle? Is there like a threshold?
There apparently is a threshold, because we do have a video today, and I'll actually pop over to that real quick, because while the Iron Dome was effective in shooting down a large amount of these rockets, one did actually land and explode in the center of Ashkelon town, which I'll show y'all right here. This was later on in the day, so it appears that MLRS barrages have been continuing over several hours today, but we can see right here that apparently one was able to slip through and slam down into the middle of this road. Of course, it appears that it's largely empty. The air raid sirens do go off when this kind of stuff happens, and so Israeli citizens, of course, race inside to try and get to cover. But we can see that the missile struck down right in the center of this road, right there. If anyone was outside, they would have been killed by that. Just wanted to make that clear, because there's always a bit of an element, of course a political element. We're not going to get into the political side of things, but you either get one side or the other with what's going on in Israel and what's going on with them and the Palestinians. There's always people who paint the Israelis as saints or the Palestinians as saints, and you really can't paint either one of them as saints, because depending on the situation, either the Israelis are the aggressor or the Palestinians are the aggressor. In this specific instance, it is the Palestinians that, of course, fired the original MLRS barrage into Israel to start off this tit-for-tat kind of exchange. That's something that is very important in this particular instance, because news articles that are out there right now trying to make it sound like, in this instance, the Israelis are some kind of bloodthirsty maniacs attacking the Gazans for no reason, they're illy placed in not looking at the sequence of events as to how they happened in this specific instance. But we did get a second video of the Iron Dome shooting down these MLRSs once more, this time during the day. And what's really interesting, hopefully you can hear this audio, Matthew, is that these missiles make a sizable sonic boom like an aircraft. So here's the video. See the missile flying over, and we can then hear the sonic boom of it. I believe this video and the interceptions are attached to what we were seeing earlier today with a rocket landing in the middle of the town in broad daylight. when you see the the missiles exploding overhead trying to shoot down as many rockets as possible. Well, we know that they weren't entirely successful, as one did get through on video and slam into the middle of the town of Ashkelon. After that, we saw that the Israelis, of course, retaliated, as in usual fashion. Nothing ever goes unpunished in Israel. If the Israelis conduct any kind of action against the Palestinians react in kind, and vice versa. Before we move on to that video, though, I forgot of another one where we could see that one of these rockets fired from the Gaza Strip actually made a U-turn like we saw in the Ukraine war before, and actually slammed right back down into the area where it was launched. And as far as we know, it may have killed several civilians, although we don't have an actual figure on that. Here's the video. See it making an immediate U-turn, slamming right back down in the city where it came from. Moving on from that video, we have a final one showing an Israeli jet bombing the streets in Gaza. Now, one thing I had to look into a lot before I uploaded this video, because one thing I will tell you, certainly, so I do not know about the Israeli rules of engagement as to how they actually conduct this kind of stuff. And so I read into it. What would be interesting to all of y'all is how this camera was set up into the exact spot where this Israeli bomb is going to land and explode. Apparently, the Israelis give a 15-minute forewarning of where they're going to strike, which gives enough time for civilians to get out of the way of the strike, but does not give enough time for supplies, ammunition, and stuff like that to be moved out of the area. They apparently also use this other thing called roof knockers, which is some kind of like a pellet or a rock or something that they drop in large clusters, so that way they'll slam onto the rooftops, and that lets these people in the area know that there will be a strike coming minutes later from the Israeli Air Force. So with that in mind, now we know why there's a camera set up in this exact spot looking in the area that's about to be hit. But here's the video showing the Israelis slamming a bomb into a building that is supposedly, according to the claim, holding munitions for some kind of a terrorist group like Hamas. We don't know what the exact group is. We haven't gotten a lot of details on that here in this channel, but that's specifically what's going on here. I also ask if everyone will keep politics out, because I know that everyone, of course, has their side that they pick. You either pick the Israelis or the Palestinians. And that kind of starts to fall into politics, and I would like if that argument didn't happen here. I'm just trying to cover the news as to what's been happening in order and in sequence. So here's the video. See the bomb slam into the building. Now, although this attack, according to what we know, was forewarned about 15 minutes in advance, from the reports we've been able to get, I have not been able to get picture evidence to back this up. Apparently, a grandmother and 2 children were killed in this bombing attack. We're still looking into that information. It may be true, considering it was a civilian building, but we did see the Israeli bomb strike into it. Now, of course, I gotta say this. So I already see some people in the chat saying that, you know, oh, the Israelis or the Palestinians are at fault and all that. Is there really and I gotta say this with Israel, is there really a neutral party or a good side involved in this? This has been going on for thousands of years, nearly at this, well, really about 1,000 years at this point, in between the Jews and the Muslims. This is pretty much a kind of a religious conflict as to actually who controls the land of Israel. Israel, of course, holds a lot of value to the Muslims, the Jews, and the Christians. The Christians largely stepped out of it and don't really do anything about Israel. You know, you don't see anyone trying to create the Kingdom of Jerusalem anymore. But we do see that, of course, the British handed over the mandate of Palestine to the Israelis at the end of the mandate's time, which was around late 1948, early 1949, and they had promised that beforehand to the Muslim Palestinians living in the area, and that's kind of where this entire modern conflict has evolved from. The first people to make an offensive against each other at the time was I guess you could say, the Arab coalition in 1949 during the Israeli War of Independence, where both sides pretty much went to war with each other. The Israelis won the war by bombing the Cairo airport with 3 B-17Gs that they were able to buy from the United States after World War II. So since then, the conflict has largely continued. Israel is kind of divided into, I guess you could say, 2 states, Palestine and Israel. We're not going to get into, if Palestine's legitimate or not. That's a whole entire other argument. But this kind of stuff has been going on since the dawn of time, and I don't really know how one can make either side look innocent compared to the other, because the Israelis, if true, just killed a grandmother and 2 kids. But at the same time, the organization that was firing the rockets into Israel were targeting Ashkelon, a civilian town, and trying to kill civilians in that area, as we saw the rocket land into the middle of a residential street. So, I don't really know who you can make out to be at fault here in these kinds of instances. It just really looks like a tit-for-tat kind of thing. And what I say, largely what I go by, is that the world works off of one set of rules, and the area of Israel and Palestine kind of work off of a whole separate set of rules, just because it's been this way ever since Israel and Palestine have existed, I guess you could say at the same time with each other, for there to be a problem. It's really complicated. You could go into this forever. You could go into this for hours. We may make a video on it, because it's actually a pretty interesting little occurrence down there. And I'm going to have to say that this specific part of the Middle East, Lebanon, Syria, Jordan, and Egypt, as well as Israel, are probably the most interesting area, at least in what's been going on over the past 70 years. And then, of course, you can go even further and say that Syria and Iraq are an interesting event, as well as Iran. And, well, really every country in the Middle East is very interesting in their own way. But anyways, that is all the news we've gotten from Israel. Hope we were able to tell that story in a largely impartial way and show what's been going on in the proper sequence of events as far as the time frame is concerned. And with that, we're now going to be moving back to Ukraine to listen to the speech from President Zelensky, which will be rounding out our tonight's news segment. And so, without further ado, here's the speech from President Volodymyr Zelensky. Let me get this up here. Wait a minute. This one does not have the speech-to-text translation. Let me go to the President of Ukraine's website, and we'll just get that right there. President of Ukraine. There. Now we will have subtitles. So let me throw this up right here, and let's get that down a little bit lower. A little bit lower. Come on, a little bit lower. There we go.
Перш за все, хочу подякувати усім нашим бійцям, усім, які надзвичайно хоробро, а на найбільш гарячих точках фронту просто такими надлюдськими зусиллями стримують ворога. Російська армія не змінить свою тактику. Ми розуміємо, окупанти знають, що програють українцям в прямих боях, поступаються в майстерності, і тому ворог робить таку ставку на артилерію і тотальні обстріли. Вони намагаються зруйнувати все перед собою і зайти на руїни. Я вдячний кожному і кожній, хто в таких умовах все ж стримує окупантів на Донбасі, на Харківщині, на Миколаївському напрямку, всюди, де зараз найбільш гостре протистояння. За цей тиждень Збройні Сили України і наша розвідка досягли сильних результатів у знищенні логістики російської армії, тилових баз окупантів. Кожен удар по складах боєприпасів ворога, по їхніх командних пунктах, по скупченнях російської техніки рятує життя всіх нас, життя українських військових і цивільних. Звичайно, я дякую партнерам, усім, хто постачає Україні необхідну зброю. Зокрема, цього тижня був погоджений черговий пакет підтримки від Сполучених Штатів, який включає в себе і боєприпаси для хаймерсів. Дуже дякую. Всі вони використовуються максимально точно і з користю для загальної стратегії нашої оборони. Робимо все, щоб отримати ще більш ефективної і сучасної зброї. Вдалося відновити морський експорт української агропродукції. Наші порти у Чорному морі знову працюють. І хоча поки що дуже рано давати загальні оцінки цього процесу, все ж можна сказати, що це позитивно і для нас з вами, і для усіх наших партнерів. Проте ключовий ризик безпековий досі не знято. Загроза російських провокацій і терактів залишається. Це мають усвідомлювати всі. Але якщо партнери виконають свою частину зобов'язань і гарантують безпечність постачання, це дійсно вирішить глобальну продовольчу кризу. І маємо не забувати, що відновлення нашого морського експорту стало можливим завдяки передусім нашим воїнам, усім, хто захищає Одещину і забезпечив звільнення Зміїної. Це просто герої всі. Протягом тижня значно розширили можливості для України на африканському напрямку. Були і нові контакти з лідерами держав, і спілкування з журналістами. Я продовжу цю роботу наступного тижня. Запланована ще серія переговорів. На жаль, маємо значне загострення ситуації навколо Запорізької атомної електростанції. Російські терористи стали першими у світі, хто використовує для терору атомну станцію, найбільшу в Європі. Будемо звертати увагу світу на це і наполягати на нових санкціях для Росії за створення такої глобальної загрози. І попри те, що російські обстріли атомної станції є одним з найбільш небезпечних злочинів проти українців та усіх європейців, проти права на життя кожної людини, чомусь немає звіту і навіть просто повідомлення від Amnesty International про це. Дуже красномовне мовчання, яке ще раз вказує на маніпулятивну вибірковість цієї організації. За цей тиждень є й нові санкційні кроки від Канади і Сполучених Штатів. Важливе рішення ухвалено Швейцарією щодо підтримки 7-го санкційного пакету ЄС. Загальна тенденція на посилення санкцій залишається незмінною і буде і надалі збільшувати для держави-терориста ціну за цей терор проти нашого народу. Хочу подякувати усім, хто розвиває нашу державу і розвиває благодійну платформу United24, усім амбасадорам цієї платформи: Андрію Шевченко, Еліні Світольні, Ліву Шрайберу гурту Imagine Dragons, Демні. Цього тижня підбивали підсумки 3 місяців роботи United24. Зібрано понад 6 мільярдів гривень внесків на відбудову, на обладнання для лікарень, на закупівлю автівок швидкої допомоги. Закуплено вже десятки швидких. Вже є і перший гвинтокрил, куплений за кошти, зібрані United24. Він буде використовуватись для порятунку поранених. Вдалося залучити допомогу з понад сотні країн. Один з найбільш відповідальних напрямків на серпень і вересень – це реалізація нашого Fast Recovery Plan, те, що необхідно зробити на звільненні від ворога території, щоб дати людям умови для нормального життя і підготуватись до осінньо-зимового сезону. Загалом вже звільнено 1060 населених пунктів. І абсолютна більшість з них потребує значних відновлювальних робіт, розмінування, будівництва соціальних об'єктів. І я дякую усім нашим партнерам, які долучились до відповідних робіт. Зокрема, цього тижня делегація Естонії відвідала райони Житомирської області, які допомагає з відновленням. Естонія першою в рамках Fast Recovery Plan обрала об'єкти для фінансування. Працюємо з дипломатами і компаніями щодо усіх інших областей, які потребують підтримки і відновлювальних робіт. Віримо у наших захисників, допомагаємо обороні, зберігаємо єдність і робимо усе для перемоги України. Вона буде. Вічна слава нашим воїнам. Слава Україні!
And with that, that's the end of the speech from President Zelensky, and that rounds out the day 164 news of the war in Ukraine. I thank you all so much for watching. It has been an absolute pleasure to cover this news tonight, and I hope we've been able to cover it in a way that depicts what's actually going on the front lines based off of video and picture evidence. And if y'all did enjoy it, please make sure to subscribe. We upload these streams every single day of the week at 10 p.m. Eastern Time, except for Mondays. We have never missed a single day except for one due to massive internet issues in our area, and I'm very proud to say that because I think that is definitely a massive undertaking by all of y'all as viewers and us as commanders of the Elite Spring Army to keep raising support for Ukraine and keep everyone, I guess you could say, apprised of the situation in the war and what other countries and the Ukrainians are doing to try and end it as fast as possible and keep Ukraine free. And with that, I thank you all once again so much for the support, and we're now about to move into the question segment and answer everyone's questions from the super chats and the live chat. But before we do, I would like to make a special note that I knew, by and large, it's almost impossible to really cover any kind of news without people trying to get political about it, that the Israel-Palestine discussion would probably devolve into politics. I, of course, have focuses beyond Ukraine, and I would like to, and I hope today that I was able to cover this in a fairly unbiased way, talking about the pros and cons of both sides, but I would ask that everyone, of course, stops trying to use the moment to try and step up on a pedestal and give out opinions. I hate to say it, But giving out opinions on the internet is like just talking to a brick wall. You can give out your opinion, and people will most likely disagree with it and never change their minds, regardless of what your opinion may be. So doing that is pretty much just setting yourself up for frustration and a fight. And I've seen some people in the live chat, they give out an opinion, someone will disagree with it, then it escalates into a fight, and then they get pissed off that someone disagreed with them and got into a fight with them. And that's going to happen if you air an opinion. And we also want to curtail fights because, of course, that's unpleasant to go through one. And so I ask that everyone refrains from politics because it doesn't really do anything. It doesn't accomplish anything, and on top of that, it just kind of makes everyone's experience unfun, heated, and it just makes for massive arguments. And so with that, we're now going to be moving into the question segment, and I'd also like to say that if we see anyone in the chat trying to stir up fights and arguments, whether it be about anything for that matter, and also really talking about certain topics like American politics or politics of any country internally, or anything like Palestine and Israel where it's going to turn into a fight, we will have to remove whoever's doing that. Just letting y'all know, speech is free, but here we're trying to run a show and let everyone enjoy it, and so we don't want people coming in here and starting up fights where people don't feel like they're having a good time anymore listening to the news. And so with that, we are now on to the first question of the night.
All right, and before we move on to our final question segment, I want to cover a poll that was put up a short while ago, and the question was, would you agree that intentionally attacking the Ukraine nuclear power plant could trigger NATO Article 5, excuse me. And this kind of ties into our discussion earlier that we had about that, and 54% of you said yes, I would agree with that position, so that is the majority, and 31% said somewhat, the position is debatable, and 14% said no, I do not agree with that. I would actually fall in the 31% camp. I think the position is debatable. There is merit to both sides of that argument. And Enforcer, I know we covered it earlier, but would you like to add anything else to that?
Not necessarily. I would just have to agree with the 31% as well, as it could be debatable. I could see a lot of arguments for getting directly involved afterwards or not, depending on how it unfolds. And so with that, I hope that does answer the live chat, and, well, not the live chat, the poll. And with that, we're now going to move on to the questions.
All right, and actually, I'm going to go ahead and cover the poll that was put up 4 minutes ago, and that question was, should we continue to cover the Israel-Gaza conflict? 67% said yes, cover it, and 33% said no, it's too controversial. So interesting results. I actually figured it'd be the other way around, but I'm actually going to put up a subsequent poll as well about that. I don't know if the Enforcer's open to entertain it, but maybe if we permit open discussions on that issue, although it's still chaotic. I don't know, Enforcer, what are your thoughts on that?
I wouldn't allow anything about open political discussion, because the thing is this, and let me explain this. This is kind of like a broken window theory, and y'all may have heard this on the Andy Griffith show before from Barney Fife. But if we allow political discussion on a single topic, that is opening up the discussion for American politics. Because as y'all know, there's a certain political group in the United States that just loves Israel. There's also another political group that could care less about Israel. And so if we allow political discussion on Israel, that is opening up the door for the discussion to easily slip into a discussion on American politics. Then, after it devolves there, and a lot of people will use the excuse, well, you're letting us talk about Israel, and this pertains to Israel, everything is going to start pertaining to Israel. We'll start talking about things like gun control and abortion and all kinds of other stuff that really has nothing to do with Israel, but because certain political parties say certain things about Israel and they also say other things about other stuff, everyone will just keep on tying the webs together until everything's connected to Israel. And then we completely have pretty much watered down the no politics rule until it's a political stream alone with a side of Ukraine news. And so unfortunately, I wouldn't really like to bring that up, because I feel like that's going to eventually lead down a slippery slope that the live chat nor the channel itself could really ever recover from. So unfortunately, I'm not going to, unfortunately for some, fortunately for pretty much everyone, we're going to keep the no politics rule. If we do discuss things around the world, we're going to keep an unbiased tone here, and if it is covered in a video, I'm not going to come down into the comments section and regulate what people are saying down there. But in the live chat on a stream, considering that this is something that people are actually watching live, there is regulation here, because I've seen it before when we used to actually try and talk about things unbiasedly in American politics as equal critiques to both sides and stuff like that. It would go violent nearly immediately, and it was almost unmanageable to control beyond that. And so I hope y'all understand why we're not wanting to go down that path. I've been here 164 days. I've seen it start to slowly go down that path before, and luckily we were able to pull it out of the minefield it was about to enter before it got too bad, and we ended up having literal fights just unfolding in the chat nonstop. So with that, I hope that kind of addresses why we won't be doing that. And so we're on to the next question.
All right, and for our first super chat of the final segment, we have a $20 donation from Smokey Valdez, who does not leave a comment, but I know Smokey has been around for a very, very long time. So Smokey, thank you very much for the support. And Enforcer will probably add a few words right now.
And yes, and thank you so much, Smokey, for the support. You're helping us to keep this channel running, and I thank you so much for enjoying it and helping us to keep this possible, because if it was without viewers like y'all, it literally wouldn't be possible. And I know I say that a lot, and I say that a lot too, but I really do mean it, and I want to say thank you so much once again. And so with that, we are on to the next one, and thank you so much for the support.
And next up, we have a $20 super chat from Santiago Flores, who says, in reference to my A10 question, is forward air controllers, FAC, not forward air traffic controllers, but the A10 is known as Strike Coordinated Armed Reconnaissance, or SCAR, and Close Air Support, CAS.
And I thank you for the support. Thank you for clearing that up. I was thinking yesterday when I was saying air traffic controller, I was like, that seems like that seems like a silly term for the military to use for that, air traffic controller. And so I knew I had gotten something wrong. So I thank you very much for clarifying that for me, and I'll make sure to try and remember that in the future as to what those abbreviations are and what they mean. Of course, we don't try and get too technical with, I guess you could say, like, the actual operation down to the squad level, or I guess you could say, the ergonomics of a vehicle all the way down to, say, like, its thermal sights and the resolution and stuff like that. But every once in a while we do, and I thank you very much for correcting us on that, because it's always important to have good information on that sort of stuff. So with that, thank you so much once again for the support, and also letting us get the correct abbreviations for that. And with that, we're on to the next one.
And up next, we have a $20 super chat from Old Salt, who actually was formerly known as Old Salty Squid. So interesting name change there. He says, keep up the good work, guys. You are the only war news that I watch. And Slava Ukraine.
And thank you so much for the support, and I'm glad that this is the Ukraine war news that you watch. We try and make sure that it is as best as possible, and it reports the news as accurately as possible. Of course, we only report video and picture evidence, because anything beyond that can be hearsay. We've seen that before on the channel. We used one bit of outside news, and it immediately turned out to be wrong. So I thank you so much for the support, and I thank you for enjoying it, because I try and put in as much effort as possible to make sure that the news is reflective of what is probably going on, at least based off of the video evidence and picture evidence. And so with that, we are on to the next one, and I thank you so much once again for the support. Also, moving on to the next one, before we do, I actually saw someone say, and I'd like to address this one real quick. Oh man, the chat's moving so fast that I don't think I'll be able to find it. Wait a minute, let me start from here again. One second, Matthew, I just want to find this one real quick. Mark said, when you realize the world isn't all black and white and get comfortable in the boring gray, nothing will bother you. That's pretty true. That's something that I think a lot of people should think about, is that, you know, I used to say this a lot before, there is no right or wrong in anything. And so, you know, you kind of got to look at the gray. And it's not the funnest thing, because it doesn't allow for violent fights and people to slaughter each other over opinions, which, you know, at the end of the day, you can have your opinions and go to sleep and wake up the next day and still be alive, even if someone has a different opinion. And that's something that I always say, is that people can have opinions. The gray is boring, and it's not as exciting as what the black and white would have you believe, but still, it does generally show you what's going on out there. And that's one thing I would ask that everyone kind of exhibits in the live chat and on the stream when y'all are talking in the live chat, because you can have an opinion and you can believe a certain way, and at the end of the day, it's not really going to change anything. And on top of that, it may not be that exact way. There may be pros and cons. Well, there's always pros and cons to both sides. There's never really a clear answer to anything. But with that, we're now on to the next one.
And moving on, we now have a super chat from Santiago Flores, who put in a $20 donation and says, if A-10s go into Ukraine, a group of American advisors would have to go with them, since no other air force has operated the type, to establish the infrastructures and speed up their operational debut.
That's an interesting statement, and I do thank you very much for the support, and that may be true. But I'm not entirely sure, because we didn't send over advisors to use the Javelins, the HIMARS, or the M777s with, as far as I know. So I'm not really sure if that would extend over to aircraft. But then again, you may have some experience to know if that would be the case. So I'm not entirely sure. I do thank you for the support and providing us with that information, because it may be true. I'm not entirely sure. But then again, I will defer to you, because you may know a little bit more about it. And so with that, thank you so much once again for the support and providing that information with us. And that may throw another wrench into the system, because then it could be said that the Americans are getting directly involved in the war, because American advisors, I guess you could say, would be in Ukraine, pretty much operating with, I guess you could say, frontline close air support units in the Ukrainian Air Force. And so with that, we are on to the next one, and thank you once again for the support.
And real quick, I just have to say, it was requested by a lot of people in the live chat. I don't know where it came from, but they wanted me to put up a poll and ask, which soft drink would you prefer? And this is maybe the most engaged poll I've ever seen on the channel. People were really quick to jump on this one. 37% said Coca-Cola, 24% said Pepsi, 21% said Dr. Pepper, and 19% said Coke with the good stuff back in. And and we may never know what the good stuff is, but we can kind of take a good stab at that, at what we're talking about.
For YouTube reasons, we cannot ever say what the good stuff is, because that could actually get the channel deleted. So let's make sure not to say that. But still, an interesting poll at that. It looks like combining both of the Coca-Colas, Coca-Cola is winning out by a massive margin. And so we're actually, due to YouTube reasons, we're going to have to end that poll, because I've actually saw someone get their channel deleted today for that exact reason, and I want to make sure that we do not go down that path. So with that, we are on to the next one.
Man, YouTube's always ruining the fun.
I know.
But anyway,
like when you said that last poll result, my heart literally sank. I was like, uh-oh. I was like, we need to get that one out of here fast. But with that, we're on to the next one.
But for all intents and purposes, we love YouTube. But anyways, moving on, we have a $20 donation from Susie Q, who says, Mr. Enforcer, yo mama sure raised a fine young man. Spend this on yo mama.
Well, thank you, Mr. Q. And my mama is
Susie
so...
Q.
Wait a minute, what?
Susie Q.
Susie Q. Why in the world did I hear that as like crazy?
Mr. Q.
Anyways, thank you for the support, Susie Q, and thank you so much for saying, yo mama raised you so well. Because I do largely believe my mama did raise me pretty well, and I'm pretty happy that she was my mom. Of course, it was a great honor to be raised by her, and of course, everyone never stops learning from their parents, and so I don't think I'll ever stop learning from her. So I will make sure to spend it on my mama. Probably get her some lunch, although she doesn't hardly ever eat, because she's always trying to diet. She likes to keep up a good figure, but I will make sure to get something for her. And so with that, thank you so much once again for the support, Susie Q. I will make sure to try and do that sometime around. And with that, we are on to the next one. And thank you so much once again for the support.
And next up, we have a $20 super chat from Melissa Harden, who says, ask Amnesty International supporters to go to Mariupol. They have lost what respect I ever had for them, which was not much. They are on the outlandish level of PETA now. Or PETA.
PETA. You know, pita bread's actually kind of nice. I don't know what you're talking about with that. But anyways, moving on from that, to talk seriously about what you're saying, it's interesting to me that Amnesty International can see the war crimes that were committed in Borodyanka and the Bucha Hospital Irpin area as a specific instance of mass war crimes. And then sit there and go, you know, the Russians, they commit war crimes on occasion and sometimes violate the rules of war, but the Ukrainians are the real monsters here. That's the most outrageous thing I've ever seen anyone say, and for that reason alone, they don't need to be an advocate for anyone, because they don't even have any kind of common sense. So with that, I hope that does address the comment. I do entirely agree with you that I don't have any respect for them. I don't know a lot about any organizations, actors, or people outside of a small group that I've always kind of like paid attention. Well, not really always. It's kind of like as passing, I will pay attention to them a little bit and then move on. So I didn't really know anything about Amnesty International until they made this statement. So that was the first time I had ever heard about them. So I never really had a good impression of them. It was immediately pretty bad. So with that, we are on to the next one. And thank you so much for the support. And I would have to agree, Amnesty International sucks. And with that, we're on to the next one.
And next up, we have a $20 super chat from Compound David, who says, for the PPP fund, pepperoni, pineapple, and pizza. And thank you very much, Compound David. Everybody remembers the PPP funds in real life. Everybody had a good time ripping those off, but we like this PPP fund PPP fund much better. We don't like the PP fund. We don't want
that. Everyone, support. I'm not even going to make a joke on that.
That's going to cause a firestorm in the chat.
Yes,
I know
yes, it is. I'm actually going to sit here and wait for it to happen. Let's sit here and look for a second. Witness what you just did, Matthew. Oh, man.
Ooh, the PP fund. He didn't say it, did
he? Yeah, someone's about to say that. Oh, my God. Yeah, there we go. There it is. JD Mako 23 is starting us off on the right track. Oh, man. Here comes the laughing from Heather. And then 180 just puts PP. And then Sandy Casey says, who's PP fun? Oh, man. Oh, no. We started Matthew, you really did it now. You really did it now. This is going to be worse.
Someone said, I wonder if the jokes will just flow in fast.
This is going to be worse than the nipple-flavored Gatorades right here. Oh, boy. The golden shower fun. Goodness, it's getting worse. It's just getting worse. People are adding on. It's just, golly, Matthew, why? Anyways, I thank you very much for the support for the PPP fund, not the PP fund. Let's get it straight, everyone. Let's pull it all together. Why would YouTube care about a poll pertaining to soda? That's a great question, and due to us not ever recognizing anything wrong with that poll, I won't be able to answer that. But still, I do thank you very much for the PPP fund, for the pineapple pizza, and what was the other one?
Pepperoni pineapple pizza.
All right, so I thank you very much for the pepperoni pineapple pizza fund, and we were going to make sure to enjoy some pineapple pizzas and hopefully not discover that we have any PP funds in the future. So with that, I thank you once again for the support. You have started an absolute firestorm in the chat based off of your super chat. It's not your fault. It's really Matthew's fault for reading it that way, but still, you have started this, and so you have credit for a brand new channel joke. You were literally ground zero for it. And so with that, thank you so much for the support. Hopefully this doesn't last too long, but with that, we're on to the next one.
And for now on, I'll probably call it the Triple P Fund just to play it safe. But up next, we have a $20 super chat from the Ukester, who says, considering how the Russians are attacking civilian targets, why aren't they shooting missiles at Kyiv? They've shot a few, but why aren't those sadists trying to destroy or at least damage the crown jewel of Ukraine?
They have occasionally, but by and large, they generally avoid hitting Kyiv. I'm not exactly sure why. It may be because they're trying to paint a good image of themselves to the citizens of Kyiv, although they already know what happened when the Russians were on their doorstep. But I'm not really sure why they've made that decision. It's one that I really can't answer. And so for that reason, I'm going to have to declare ignorance, because I think the only people who can answer that are in the Russian Ministry of Defense, and we don't really have a way to reach out and ask them a question, and I don't think we'd really like to even talk to them for that matter. So with that, we're going to move on to the next question. I thank you so much for the support, but unfortunately, we don't really have any reason or explanation as to why that is happening. And so with that, we are on to the next one.
And next up, we have a $20 super chat from Sniper1, who says, coffee and pizza fun for the Enforcer and Matt. Slava Ukraine, and keep up the great work.
And thank you so much for the support. We are going to make sure to get some coffee and some pizza. I always enjoy pizza. Actually, there's a funny way that I pronounce pizza as a joke with my family. I say pizza, like with a W. I don't know why. I don't even know why I started saying that way, but I just said pizza, and it kind of stuck. But I do thank you so much for the support. I'm going to make sure to get some coffee and some pizza. so that way I can enjoy myself while I continue to make sure to cover this news. And so with that, I thank you so much once again for the support. It does help us to keep these streams running and keep on eating like that actually in the background. And so with that, we are on to the next one, and thank you once again.
And next up, we have a $12 super chat from Junebug with the 72 at the end, who says, hello to you too. Thank you. Slava Ukraine and Hiram Slava. And hello to you as well, Junebug, and Hiram Slava.
And also, thank you once again for the support, Junebug. I've actually talked to both Junebug72 and Junebug in a Discord call before. They were incredibly nice, and it was wonderful to talk to them. I don't really get to talk to a lot of viewers often, usually because I'm busy in the background doing college or running these streams or something, but I always love talking to viewers, and of course, it was an absolute pleasure to talk to both you, Junebug, and Junebug72. And so with that, thank you so much for the support, and thank you so much for allowing me to talk to y'all for a minute. It was a real pleasure for me. And so with that, we are on to the next one, and thank you so much once again for being both of y'all being a longtime member of the Lee Spring Army. And with that, we're on to the next question.
And next up, we have a $10 super chat from Derek Rosefan, who says, I'm a Jewish American, and it's tough to see what's going on in Israel and Palestine, and I want to move there.
Well, I thank you very much for the support. It is, not to get political or anything, but the situation that has always been occurring in the Israel-Palestine area since 1949 has been pretty tense. It just usually ends up in innocent people getting the short end of the stick from both sides. It's kind of a little bit of a tough thing, and while it's heavily contentious, there's no right or wrong answer really in anything, and there's definitely no right or wrong answer in Israel. You could really make good points for both sides. There's pros and cons to both of them. That's usually what I say about everything, because there is. And I know that some people say there are hardcore black and white things, certain things are right and certain things are wrong. And if that was true and certain things were right and certain things were wrong, then how come there's always the other side that says the opposite? And that tells me that there is no clear right or wrong. It is whatever you believe. That's always something that I think people should always pay attention to and think about, because if something was just right, then why in the world can half of the population say one thing and half of them say the other on literally the exact same topic? And so with that, we're going to be moving on to the next question. I thank you so much for the support, and I once again ask that the chat does not get political. Whenever I make comments, I usually make them as an equal critique. I don't mean them to start off someone being able to get on a soapbox and state their opinions and act like there is a basis or some kind of reason for it. And so with that, we are on to the next one. And thank you so much once again for the support.
And next up, we have a $10 super chat from WF2U, who decoded tonight's message, along with Ashley, who said, Enforcer and Enforcer Matt, here are the coordinates. It is the Pistol Club, Artemida in Donetsk. Message 2, the Russian attack on the power plant is a criminal act.
And yes, that is correct. You got them both correct. Ding, 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 ding. And there's the pistol range right here. I actually know exactly where that was. We just put it in tonight and made sure to remember it like no tomorrow. But we did mark this because it did seem that there was at least enough pads out here that you could maybe store something here. And of course, we always just mark these as suspected places. We're not saying that we have any hardcore information to say that these places are ammo dumps are being used by the Russian military, but just based off of the general rule, which has been largely correct so far, I would say that it may be one. But of course, I never say that the Ukrainians ought to just go and strike the thing immediately, but they should always conduct reconnaissance and make sure that they're, not just going off of, like, I guess you could say, the act of passion and just hitting the thing immediately. But with that, we are on to the next one, and I thank you so much once again for the support, and also, ding, 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 you got it correct. And with that, we're on to the next question. Also, one other thing I'd like to address is that someone said saying there is no right or wrong is basically nihilism. I would have to disagree with that. I call that having an open mind and being open to both sides. I think that's something important if anyone is wanting to actually have a philosophical conversation, or a conversation for that matter of any type, because if you just say it's just one way and it's this way and everyone else is wrong, you'll never be able to talk to anyone, because you'll just constantly be getting arguments and fights, about your opinion. And regardless whether they change your opinion or you change their opinion or not, why close yourself off to listening to the other side? I always think it's important to do. So with that, I hope that kind of addresses that real quick, because I don't know if that's nihilist or what, because I don't try and subscribe to some particular group and act like I live and breathe what they do. I'm just me and I do me. But I always think that both sides of every argument usually have some pros and cons to them, and you should always look through them and see what they are, even if you disagree with them, just so that way you know what they're actually about. So with that, we're on to the next one.
All right. And next up, we have a $10 super chat from MJ, who says, Enforcer, why don't we hear anything about the Bayraktars anymore?
We don't really, I'm not really sure. I can't really answer that question exactly, because we don't know if they've been destroyed to the point that they're not being used much anymore. We don't know if the information has been classified. We're not entirely sure. And so unfortunately, I'm going to declare ignorance on that, because we don't know what's really happened to the Bayraktars. Every once in a while, we do get a video or two from them. Usually they're being used in the Black Sea. But beyond that, we haven't seen much of them. And so with that, thank you once again for the support. I hope that kind of gives an idea of how mystical the Bayraktars have become. We really don't know a lot about them, and they've almost become myth at this point. And so with that, we're on to the next one, and thank you so much for the support.
And next up, we have a $10 super chat from Carolyn, who says, did you see that several top Russian military scientists have been arrested for treason? Is that common in wartime? And great job, Enforcers.
And thank you so much for the support, and thank you for enjoying the channel. And I have not heard about the scientists being arrested. I don't know if that's a common wartime thing historically. I can't think of any historical instances off the top of my mind where it is, but I'm very sure that that's probably happened at some point in history somewhere. But unfortunately, I can't give you a particular instance as to when. But with that, I hope that does answer the question, at least in a way. And I thank you very much for the support. I haven't heard about it, and so unfortunately, I can't tell you if that's normal or not. But with that, we're on to the next one, and thank you so much once again for the support.
And up next, we have a $10 super chat from Melissa Harden once again, who says, typical Russian aiming with the trenches. Do they even understand that the Ukrainians are not standing in front of or behind the trenches? They just cannot seem to hit the trenches.
Can you reread that one real quick?
Yes, and every time the word trenches is said, take a sip. Just joking, Melissa. But anyway, Melissa said, typical Russian aiming with the trenches. Do they even understand that the Ukrainians are not standing in front of or behind the trenches? They just cannot seem to hit the trenches.
That's a pretty good point. You know, for some reason, this one is not clicking in my head, Matthew. I hate to say it. So could you reread that one more time, maybe in a little bit of different wordage, to see if I can get it this time?
So let's see. Melissa wants to know, why are the Russians aiming for the trenches? Do they even understand that the Ukrainians aren't even there? And even at that, they can't hit the trench anyway.
I'm not really sure why they do aim at trenches. Aiming at trenches, of course, is the thing that you have to do to try and uproot enemy forces. The trench largely protects soldiers from artillery fire, so they may be trying to slam into the trench and try and take out the Ukrainians, but the good point is that there's not really any there in most videos we see, and in the one video we saw, only one Ukrainian soldier was in the area to even be wounded, and then other soldiers ran down and got him out of there. So I'm not really sure why they do that. I think they may be getting some... Well, they don't have faulty reports because they're using drones to spot these trenches and then fire onto them. So I'm not really sure. I don't really know why they're doing that, honestly. Maybe it's just incompetence on their end and they think, you know, it's a trench, it's a Ukrainian position, let's just hit it to be safe. That may be their whole entire school of reasoning there as to why they're doing that. And so with that, I thank you so much once again for the support. I hope that does address the comment. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And up next, we have a $10 super chat from Vidisha Baba, who says, what are your thoughts on Patriarch Kirill?
Who is that? Can you spell that for me real quick, Matthew?
It's Patriarch Kirill, K-Y-R-I-L.
Patriarch Kirill. This is the Patriarch of Moscow and all Rus. This guy is the head of the Russian Orthodox Church. And due to, I hate to say this, don't mean to cop out, but this would be like talking about the Pope. And so, you know, you can say it's not, you can say it is, but the Eastern Orthodox, I guess you could say, denomination is a pretty big one, and I don't really want to make any comments on them, and also I don't know much about them. So with that, I hope that does at least address the comment in a way. I'm sorry I can't answer it, but I don't want to get into that because we may have a decent amount of Eastern Orthodox viewers on this stream, and I don't want to sit there and bash the guy or praise him just because. So with that, we're going to move on to the next one. Sorry about that, but thank you once again for the support.
And up next, we have a $10 super chat from BL Parak, who says, another strongman contest today in Cardiff, Wales. Ukrainians Pavlo, Lord have mercy, let's see if I can say that. Pavlo Nekonechkany, I can't even say it, and Oleksiy Novikov got first and third place, respectively.
Well, hey, that's pretty nice to hear, and it's pretty neat to hear that Ukrainian athletes are out there still winning medals all over the place. We actually had the World Games in Birmingham, Alabama, and some of the Ukrainian teams actually ended up winning some pretty decent medals at that. So pretty impressive to hear, and I thank you very much for the support. And it is cool to hear that Ukrainian teams are still out there representing their country as best as they can. The Ukrainians have had some pretty impressive athletes and sports teams. For example, Kyiv Dynamo, while not being the best football team in Europe, or soccer team as some would say, it's still fairly good. It's on up there. And also they've had Vladimir Klitschko. They've had a whole bunch of impressive athletes come out of Ukraine, and it is still cool to hear that even during this war, they're out there showing that the Ukrainians are pretty good at what they do in a lot of categories. And so with that, thank you so much once again for the support. Hope that does answer the question. And with that, we are on to the next one. I see a lot of people saying that the dude is a pro-Kremlin puppet and all kinds of things with Kirill. But due to him being the head of a religious organization, there's a little bit of a difference in between talking about him and someone else, because one thing that we try and remove a lot of in here is politics. And of course, if you've ever heard anyone say this, they always say, don't talk about religion or politics. And I know that everyone's about to say, well, war is about religion, and I'm sorry, but I'm going to have to say I don't really care. It may be, but I'm not trying to sit here and start religious wars and political wars in the live chat section. I understand that a lot of people would like to talk about that, but one thing I got to say is that while a lot of people can have great, interesting conversations about it, there are people out there who would use that to stir a pot, get people in the fights for no reason rather than to do it, and I've never seen political or religious discussions on the internet go well. And I've lived on the internet my entire life, and so I want to make sure that we avoid that. And so for that reason, I'm not going to be commenting on Kirill, even if he does have clear sentiments towards a certain group. So with that, we are on to the next one.
All right. And next up, we have a $10 super chat from Thomas PDX, who says, thank you, Enforcer and Matt. I found your channel a few weeks ago and watch you every day now. People like you and your show because people like to hear the truth, and you provide that. Great work, guys.
And thank you so much for the support, and thank you for the kind comments. Did he say he's only been here for a few days?
A few weeks.
Few weeks. Well, you're brand new. I mean, like, that's fairly new. We have a lot of viewers who've been around forever, and I always love to hear that we're getting new Lee Spring Army members who enjoy this stream a lot as well. And so thank you so much for the support. Welcome to the Lee Spring Army. You're brand new here, and I hope you have a fun time. There's a lot of interesting people in the live chat who have a lot of knowledge and like to talk about all kinds of stuff pertaining to the war and a lot of technical stuff that sometimes I can't even go into. And so I hope you, of course, enjoy the people in the live chat, make some friends, and thank you so much for enjoying the stream and saying that we speak the truth. We try our best sometimes, and there is a couple of strikes against the channel. I will say sometimes we do get things wrong, factually on certain things, but usually thanks to the viewers, we usually are able to correct them very quickly. And some people, I've seen bots, and I've seen actually some people make the statement, he gets things wrong, he's just like CNN. But the problem with CNN, Fox, whatever you like, name a mainstream organization, they try and say I'm the same. The difference between me and them is that they'll peddle that lie, and then they'll keep it going, and they'll never correct it. And if I say something untrue, people will say that's not true, and then I'll be like, wait a minute, a lot of people are saying this, let's pull it up. I'll pull it up, and I'll be like, well, I was wrong, so we're correcting that. And that's kind of the big difference, is that not to toot my own whistle, but I'm willing to say I'm wrong and correct a statement while mainstream news isn't. And so I thank you so much for appreciating our channel. I hope that's a part of the reason why, because I always try and be intelligent in a way and not always act like everything I do and say is going to be perfect and correct, because it's not. And so with that, thank you so much once again. I hope you do continue to enjoy the channel, and thank you for helping us to keep this thing going. And with that, we are on to the next one.
All right. And up next, we have a $10 super chat from West Fry, who says, Enforcer keeps saying MLRS barrages from Gaza, but do they have MLRSs? I've been under the impression they've always been homemade rockets coming from multiple locations. How do we know what they are?
I'm assuming they're MLRSs because they all look like they have the exact same point of origin. Now, I'm not saying it's like a grad or anything like that, like a BM-21, but it's most likely a whole bunch of tubes that they've constructed in like a box shape, kind of like a BM-21. They load the rockets into it, take it to a location, and then they just fire them off en masse. That would be the most effective way to use it, because you don't need a large crew for that. If you had an individual MLRS tube in multiple locations, like 20 of them, you're going to have probably 1 or 2 people for each of them. And so for 20 individual tubes, you're going to need about 40 people. But if you group them all together into one large, I guess you could say, launcher, you could probably have about 4 people to operate the thing. And so in terms of what seems logical and efficient, it's probably one large MLRS-like launcher, not mounted to a vehicle, probably just set up somewhere and then fired off. So I hope that kind of addresses it in a way. Of course, we don't have any actual videos or picture evidence of the actual launcher itself, but based off of the videos we've seen and how all of the missiles launch from a single spot, we have to assume, logically, that it must be some individual launcher made up of multiple tubes. And so with that, I hope that does answer that question in a way. That's a great question, actually, and it does bring up the question, do we actually know if it's similar, if it's an MLRS? And we're basing that statement largely off of what seems logical, but then again, it may not be. It may be multiple individual launchers in one small area. So with that, we are on to the next one, and thank you so much once again for the support and bringing that up, because that was actually a great question.
And up next, we have a $20 super chat from the Darth Knight, who says, you guys are doing fantastic work. I don't visit very often, but I'm going to try to change that real soon, and I appreciate you guys.
Hey, well, I thank you so much for the support, and it's totally fine if you don't visit often. A lot of people are busy out there and got lives, and of course I understand that, and I hope you're having a good time out there, and you're making sure to, like put your nose to the grindstone and succeed and everything. But of course, I hope that you do come around a little bit more. Of course, I love to know that people do enjoy these streams and love to watch them. And interestingly enough, we actually have seen. Because I was interested, because if y'all may notice, every once in a while we'll have up to, like tonight, our peak viewership was around 6.2 thousand people. And then last night it was around 5.55. And interestingly enough, this stream and last night's stream and the streams before that, regardless of how many people we got on the live stream itself, they always end up getting around the same amount of views, which is around 63,000. And so, oddly enough, if people don't watch the stream live, they just watch it afterwards. And so, who do not have the time to watch them live, but they watch them after the stream, depending on what they're doing. And so, it's totally fine. I understand. A lot of people do that, but I thank you so much for the support. And I hope that we do see you in the live chat a lot more often, because I love to know that people do watch this live and do enjoy it. And so, for everyone in the future watching this after it's uploaded, make sure to hop on, because I do love to know that people are here and make the little pilgrimage every once in a while, and I always find that pretty neat, just, as a bee thing. So with that, thank you so much once again for the support. I hope that does address the comment, and I hope we do see you around here more often. So with that, we are on to the next one.
And up next, we have a $8 super chat from Level 70, who says, Enforcer, with North Korea agreeing to send 100,000 troops to Ukraine, how do you think NATO will respond? I think we'll laugh.
I think we will. I think Matthew just answered that pretty well for me. Actually, Matthew, I would like to see for a second, if you feel comfortable with it, if you would like to take a minute to answer that question, because Matthew is actually a little bit into North Korea, has actually looked at it a little bit, and if you would like, Matthew, I'd like to see if you would be interested in answering that question real quick.
Well, personally, me, there's not much to say. I think it's pretty much moot. North Korean troops are very hungry, they're very tired, and they live in a country where it's an oppressive dictatorship. So they aren't going to do much good over there in Ukraine for Russia's sake. And basically, it's just some gesturing by Russia with North Korea. So it's not much is going to come out of it. It's just a lot of talk, really.
And that's one thing I have to say is that this seems a lot like the Syrian volunteers kind of situation, where this is all made up hokey pokey stuff. We've never heard the North Korean government officially say this. This is all just hearsay and rumors and what ifs. And why in the world would the North Koreans give up 100,000 volunteers to fight in the Ukraine war? That makes no sense to me politically, because Russia is a capitalist country that is something of a dictatorship. So they kind of do have something similar with North Korea in that they're a dictatorship. But at the same time, they're not similar enough, like in the Soviet Union times, where North Korea and Russia almost have mutually aligned interests. So I don't really know if that would happen. It's largely a rumor right now. And if 100,000 volunteers actually did wind up in Russia, oh my God, they wouldn't even be able to support themselves. I mean, like, what, are we kidding? They don't even, the North Koreans hardly even have a logistical base to work off of, much less supplies. So the Russians would literally be taking 100,000 extra North Koreans into their military, having to supply them and then use them, and then also make sure that they're able to be used through the supply lines. So I largely think it's a joke and it's nothing more than a bunch of talk. And so with that, I hope that does answer the question. I thank you so much for the support. Good question. We haven't had that one tonight, and so I hope we were able to answer that one pretty well. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And next up, we have a $6 super chat from NOIDB, who says, which countries are producing Russian munitions and armaments and parts outside of Russia? Do you think anyone is doing it covertly? And I tried finding the answer, but I couldn't.
And I hate to say it, I don't really know. There's a lot of former Soviet countries out there like Ukraine. I would feel like if anyone was producing former Soviet munitions, it would be the Ukrainians, because up until 2016, they were largely using Russian weapons, and so they had to have some way to produce them. And the Ukrainians, during the Soviet Union's history, were the ones who were out there producing all of the equipment for the Soviet Union by and large. So I feel like they would be the ones doing it if anyone was. They do have the Kharkiv tractor factory, and they produced most of the Soviet Union's tanks in that factory, and they upgraded a lot of theirs and also manufacture a few new ones here and there from that factory as well. And so I feel like if anyone was actually producing Soviet munitions and arms, it would be the Ukrainians out of everyone. Maybe the Belarusians. I think the Baltic states and Poland, along with Romania, have also completely stopped producing Soviet weapons and equipment. I think they're now mostly working towards producing Western equipment, because that's what they're using now, considering that they're a part of NATO and they all have a standardized kind of Western doctrine and supply line side of things. And so I think the Ukraine would be the only one that produces those kinds of supplies if I had to make an assumption. So with that, I hope that does answer the question. And thank you once again for the support. Wonderful question, actually. That's a good one. It focuses on logistics, and I hope we're correct. But then again, we can be wrong, so take it with a grain of salt. So with that, we're on to the next one. And thank you once again.
And up next, we have a $6 super chat from Putin will hang in the middle of the Kremlin, who says, there was only one washing machine in that village. What a waste.
Oh man, for some reason, when you read that, Matthew, you remember that Irish guy who said, there was only one bar a mile long. You remember that guy?
Oh, yeah, I do.
For some reason, there's only one washing machine. Or, in every house, yeah! Something like that.
Oh, yeah, I know exactly what meme you're talking about now.
Yeah.
He just kept coming back with a new one every time somebody said something.
Yeah. There was one drone. Oh, for every Russian, yeah! They had one.
Yeah.
They had one grenade. Oh, for every tank, yeah! You know, like, just keep that going forever. But to answer that question, Putin will hang in the middle of Kremlin. Yes, they only had one washing machine in that town. And was the one washing machine really worth 100 Russians? I think it isn't. But the Russians, you know, they are hungry for those washing machines. Like in the movie Rocky, you know, they always said, he's hungry. They're hungry for a washing machine. And so with that, we're on to the next one. And thank you so much once again for Putin will hang in the middle of the Kremlin for your support. And I hope that does address the joke pretty well. And I thank you so much for being a veteran of the Lee Spring Army. And so with that, we are on to the next one. And thank you so much once again for the support.
And up next, I want to give a shout out to Paul Mint and Jim Toy for putting in a $5 donation each, but without a comment. But thank you very much to both of you for your support of the channel. And with that being said, we are moving on to the next one, which is from NOYDB, once again, who puts in a $6 donation this time. And it says, I think Ukrainians are using their new troops as reserves. When the Russians reposition from an area, I think that's their opportunity to send in those reserves.
That is a possibility. And he's speaking of the North Korean reserves.
I think he's talking about the Ukrainians.
Okay, 1 second. For some reason, because I'm sorry, I was over here trying to adjust some stuff in the control room real quick because I saw something that was really wonky. Could you reread that one for me real quick?
Yes, he said, I think Ukrainians are using their new troops as reserves. When the Russians reposition from an area, I think that's their opportunity to send in the reserves.
I would have to say that largely would be correct. And they're green, and so you don't want to send the green units up to the front, but at the same time, they may eventually, so that way they can rotate out some of the battle-hardened and worn-out units, because you can't, like, the one thing that's not really considered often is that you can't keep frontline units on the front lines forever. Exhaustion will take place. Those units will lose effectiveness over time, and they'll eventually be steamrolled if they stay there long enough. And so you do have to rotate units out, and they may also be using those reserves to fill in those parts of the front line that are quieter, so that way, you know, the green units are having to go into a, I guess you could say, pitched battle, and at the same time, they're able to get those battle-hardened units off the front lines and have them get a little bit of R&R for a little while before they send them back up. So I think that will largely be true, and they may also be using them to plug gaps anywhere that's needed. And so I would have to agree with you. That's probably what the Ukrainians are using their reserves and new units for. And so with that, I thank you so much once again for the support. Very good observation. I think that's a great point right there. And with that, we are on to the next one. And thank you so much for the support.
And up next, we have a $5 super chat from Mr. E-Man, who says, I've been lurking quietly for quite some time. I enjoy your updates and keep the good content coming.
Well, I thank you so much, E-Man, for the support. And a lot of people have been quietly lurking. If to speak of American political jargon, y'all are the silent majority. But I'm always happy to know that a lot of people are always on here watching, whether they talk in the live chat or whether they send in a super chat or click the like button. Please click the like button. But beyond that, whatever they do, I'm always happy to know that people are watching and that they do enjoy these streams enough to come back and keep on watching them. And so with that, thank you so much once again for the support. It's totally okay that you're quietly in the shadows. That's fine by me. But I do thank you once again for helping us to keep this channel running, because viewers like you are the only thing that keeps the lights on and keeps the gears turning, and the little hamster right beside my desk running on its wheel, that's actually my brain, so that way I can keep these Ukraine war streams running. And so with that, we're on to the next one, and thank you once again for the support.
When did you get a hamster?
Actually, it's inside my head. It was right now. I've actually taken out my brain because it's gotten a little bit worn out, and I put it over on the side of my desk. But there's a little hamster in there that runs on a wheel, and that's the only thing that keeps me mentally going. So right now I'm running on autopilot, but I think we'll be okay.
Oh, well, let's keep the hamster running on the wheel. We're moving on to the next super chat, which is a $5 donation from C.A. Lear, or Kalir, I'm not sure how to say it, who says, could I ask a small favor? Some of us run in full screen and do not know polls are up. Could they be announced at the start and not just at the end? And since I'm the one that put the polls up, I will say that at the moment, I kind of put polls up randomly. There's really no rhyme or reason to it. Some of the questions pertain to what we're watching, and then some of them don't, as y'all see quite often. Some of them are random, and somebody's like, where'd that one come from? So it's kind of difficult to announce it, because if the enforcer was in the middle of a segment about, you know, the Ukrainians firing an RPG or something like that, just hypothetically, and I were to say, enforcer, quickly, I want to say Coke or Pepsi. I think that might be a little out of place.
Also,
but
you got to consider context, adding on to what Matthew said. I could be showing Russians getting obliterated on top of an MTLB, and then he comes on, blue light alert, we have a new poll. What would you like better, ham sandwich or peanut butter and jelly? That doesn't really sound good. So, but I'll let Matthew take back over again.
But yes, I do know that that is a problem to answer the question seriously, and sadly, I'm not sure how to fix it. It looks like the issue is he's not sure if the polls are up. So I might actually put a chat in the live chat and announce it that way. But sadly, I couldn't announce it audibly because I'd be interrupting the flow of the enforcer's news. But we will take that under advisement, and thank you very much for your support. And also, I know you've been around for a while, so thank you very much for being a viewer for a very long time. And up next, we have a $5 super chat from Ole Wolansky, who says, for Enforcer Matt's insightful contribution to the nuclear power plant conversation. And I can't remember what I said, but thank you very much, Ole, for thinking my opinion was pretty insightful there. And thank you very much for your support as well. I know you've been around for, I think Ole's been around since day 5 or something like that, hasn't he?
I think he has.
Yeah, he's been around for a really long time, and we appreciate you very much, Ole. Thanks for watching, and thank you for supporting us as well. And up next, we have a $5 super chat from Putin will hang in the middle of the Kremlin, who says, let's not even talk about Lend-Lease Act, which enabled Russians to defeat Nazi Germany.
Yes, that is true. And thank you so much for saying that, because nowadays modern historians go, the Soviet Union won the war entirely on their own, and if it wasn't for the United States and Britain getting involved in the war, they would have eventually won. But the thing is that we never saw the Russians actually secure the initiative and start pushing the Russians back until after they had received nearly 200,000 trucks from the United States. And that's something that no one gives us credit for, and if it wasn't for the United States' manufacturing abilities in the Second World War, the Russians would have probably dragged this war on forever, and they would have never won. I wouldn't say they would have never won, but they would have been on par with the Germans, because the only thing that gave them the upper hand from early 1942 onwards, I would say mid to late 1942 and on, is the Lend-Lease. Until then, the Russian government literally never focused on producing anything logistically. It's retarded, and I can't really say it any other way, because the Soviet government was the stupidest thing that ever lived, and letting people who have absolutely no idea or experience about anything to do with anything, or even read about it, and then put them in charge and let them decide what gets produced was a bad idea. Because after the war started, the Soviet government was like, we need tanks. And so they produced tens of thousands of tanks, but they don't even have a way to fuel them. I mean, this type of stuff seems like it would be common sense, because of, and I mean, I guess this is just me. A lot of people probably think like this, but if I was to build a tank, I'd be like, what do we need to run that tank? Because there's not just going to be gas stations all over the place, right? And, there's not just going to be ammunition just appearing, right? Yeah, okay, so how many trucks do we need per tank to be able to actually field them? And then get that answer, say, okay, so for every tank produced, we need this equal amount of quota of supply trucks being produced as well. That just seems like it makes sense to me. But no one ever gives the United States credit for literally saving the Russians. Well, not really the Russians, but the Soviet Union from their own stupidity at that point, because if it wasn't for the Lend-Lease providing them the logistical means and the know-how to actually supply their frontline units, which is the most important part of a war, they would have never actually turned it around. And that's something that a lot of people always talk about with the Germans. Oh, they never prepared for the winter. Yeah, the Russians didn't even prepare for the war. They didn't prepare for anything. But with that, anyways, I'm going on to a rant about World War II and logistics and everything. But I do thank you so much for the support. And I would have to agree that the United States was the one that helped the Soviet Union turn the war around and win. And if it wasn't for that, the Russians would have been on the gates of Moscow for a year or two, and they may have even been pushed back out of Moscow, because they would have never been able to regroup their forces supply-wise. And so with that, we're on to the next one, and I thank you so much once again for the support.
And up next, we have a $5 super chat from Yuri Bench. And sadly, I'm not going to be able to read that comment on stream, as I said earlier, because it gets very, very deeply political. But thank you very much for the support. And moving on to the next one, we have a $5 donation from Putin will hang in the middle of the Kremlin once more, who says, please notify Sour Vodka that he forgot to include his phone number.
Say what?
I'm not really sure.
Can you reread that one real quick?
He said, please notify Sour Vodka that he forgot to include his phone number.
I'm not exactly sure what that means, but I do thank you for the support. And I think we gave him a public shout out. Hopefully he will remember that. But with that, we're on to the next one. And thank you once again for the support.
All right. And up next, we have a $20 super chat from Blue Flam 777, who says, I know Russia is corrupt. The proof is in the Putin.
And I thank you so much for the support, Blue Flame 777. That is true. It is in the Putin, and they have been corrupt for a pretty long while. Also, I would like to address this. Graham 1971 says every country thinks they won the war. It was the Allies. Maybe, but I do have to make a point that without supplies or without any of that in the background, you're going to lose. And after the British had to withdraw from Dunkirk, they lost all of their supplies. And if it wasn't for U.S. support giving the British supplies to rebuild the British army, they would have been in a pretty bad spot trying to re-enter the war in Normandy, or for that matter, in Sicily, or in North Africa. Because a lot of what the British ended up using in North Africa was American lended. That's why there was a lot of Honey Stewarts and M3 Grants, as they called them in the British Army, around that time. And also later on Shermans that eventually evolved into Sherman Fireflies and such things. So, yes, you could say it was the Allies, but if it wasn't for the United States' industrial capacity at the time to just produce ungodly numbers of anything and everything anyone could have ever imagined, that war would have gone differently. The Allies, if it wasn't for the United States' manufacturing ability and how far they were ahead of everyone else, the Allies would have been on par with the Germans because logistically, at that point, they were literally equally balanced. But you know, that's a whole entire essay that I could go into, and that's just my opinion. And while history is facts, you can still draw opinions out of them and say that things turned out a certain way because of A, B, and C. So with that, I hope that does address that at least in a way. I hope you see where I'm coming from. But then again, you know, if you don't, that's fine. But with that, we're on to the next one.
And up next, we have a $5 super chat from Robin M, who says a little show of appreciation.
And thank you so much for the little show of appreciation. We're very grateful for every little bit. It helps us to keep running these streams, and I gotta say, thank you so much. Even if it's a little bit, it counts a long way in helping us to keep the lights on, keep the hamster churning. I actually had my brain recharged now. I've put it back in my head. Little hamster's running as fast as it can, and I thank you so much once again for the support. And so with that, we are on to the next one.
And up next, we have a $5 super chat from Charlotte S, who does not leave a comment, but thank you very much, Charlotte, for the support. And up next, we have a $5 super chat from Sweaty Chungus, who says, "I got 5 on the PP Fun custom merge."
Matthew, why did you have to say that? This is probably not going to go away for weeks, but I thank you very much for the support, and we will make sure to keep you notified of that. So with that, we're on to the next one, and thank you so much once again for the support.
And we're not done yet. Up next, we have a $5 super chat from Compound David, who says, okay, here's 5 more for the PP Fund.
No! Okay, well, I thank you for it. It does help us out a lot, but man, Matthew, you know, one slip of the tongue can really come back to bite you. But with that, we're on to the next one, and thank you once again for the support.
All right, and up next, we have a $5 super chat from Sniper1, who says, this is off topic, but did you know that it is actually a CSGO pro called Simple, who is Ukrainian?
Can you say that again real quick?
They said, this is off topic, but did you know that it is actually a CSGO pro called Simple, who is Ukrainian?
I didn't, because I haven't, unfortunately, never played CSGO. So with that, I'm going to have to declare ignorance on that one, but if it is true, that's actually pretty interesting. So with that, we're on to the next one.
And up next, we have a $5 super chat from Xavier Estrada, who says, should Ukraine push more troops from the northern and western regions to push counteroffensives in the south or east before winter sets in?
Yes, maybe. One thing I'm thinking at this point, and because, you know, we've heard the rumors that the Russians may be preparing to withdraw from the Kherson area, I think we may just be seeing that if the Ukrainians hold out long enough and inflict enough casualties on the Russians, they may eventually just win the war because the Russians will keep on withdrawing from front line after front line until there's nothing left. That may be the case. The only thing they would really have to take by force would be Crimea and the Donbass in a way. But maybe. I'm not really sure if repositioning forces, though, a lot of them would do a lot of good. Maybe take the new units and move them down there, because by and large, the Ukrainians are stretched fairly well to just try and keep on par with the Russians in some of these areas. And so I would have to say, in my opinion, I would keep those forces there and just try and move the newer, fresher units in as reserves for the units in the south if there was to be counterattacks pushed there. And so with that, I hope that does answer the question, and I thank you very much for the support. And with that, we're on to the next one.
And up next, we have a $5 super chat from Aaron Taubman, who says the rockets being fired. Let's see here. I'll make sure I'm not about to read something political. He said the rockets being fired from the Palestinian-controlled areas are the Katyusha rockets.
Well, thank you very much for the support, and let's pull those up real quick. Katyusha rockets. Katyusha rockets. Ah, sweet. The good old Katyushas. Also, notice this. Notice this, everyone. Okay, I want to show y'all how important the Lend-Lease really is. That is a Russian Katyusha. That's a gas truck. This picture depicts, I believe, if I'm correct, that's an American-made Studebaker. This is an American-made Studebaker. I know that for sure. That's how common American trucks were in the Second World War, is that even when the Russians were trying to make rocket artillery, they used American-made trucks for it, like the Studebaker. So if that doesn't give you a perspective of how many trucks the U.S. actually sent over, we can actually get some figures on that in the future, but it's massive in comparison to how many trucks the Russians produced. It's more than 50 to 60% of all of the Russian supply trucks in the war were American-made. And so with that, I hope that does answer the question in a way. And also, thank you very much for letting us know what kind of rockets were actually used in Israel, in Palestine, in the Gaza Strip against Israel. And so with that, we are on to the next one. And thank you once again for the support.
And up next, we have another super chat from Putin will hang in the middle of the Kremlin, who puts in a $5 donation and says, when you asked chat to let you know where they are from, Sour Vodka included the floor he was living on, as well as the house number from Sydney, Australia. I thought it was very funny.
Oh, well, Sour Vodka, don't do that. You just talked to yourself. No. Sour Vodka, you need to move now. You need to change addresses, change everything. I didn't know that. And I told everyone, I was like, do not give away your personal address. Just give it, just say the town if you're comfortable in the country. But Sour Vodka, man, I didn't know that. I'm sorry about that. I don't know if we can actually find that one and delete it, but if we can, we will. So I thank you very much for the support and letting us know what that was about, because I missed that. So I hope that does address the comment. And I'm sorry, Sour Vodka, if you're still here. That's a little dangerous to do, especially on the internet. So with that, we're going to move on to the next one. And thank you for the support, and thank you for letting us get a little bit of context as to what happened there.
And it'd be pretty funny if it was the house of somebody he didn't like and he was trying to dox them, because it might end up that way, but hopefully not. But up next, we have a $3 super chat from NOYDB, who says, large underground salt mines and other mines, great place to store things, and lots of these places in Ukraine.
That is true. There's a lot of salt mines in Ukraine. And I honestly think that the Russians are starting to get a lot of salt mines due to how pissed off they're getting with the Ukrainians. But I would have to say, though, that would be a smart place to store a lot of stuff, is usually in mines. In the Second World War and the First World War, it was common for mines and formerly used mines to be used as storage compartments and storage room for ammunition and such things like that. They're an incredibly safe way to store it. And so with that, I hope that does address the comment. And I thank you so much for the support and also bringing that up, because the Ukrainians do have a lot of that in their advantage. So with that, we're on to the next one.
And up next, we have a $3 super chat once more from NOYDB. He says, poll suggestion. Oh, man. Okay, I see what he tried to do here. He's going to try to see if he can trip me up a little.
Hang on, Matthew. My headset just died. Give me just a second.
Uh-oh. I thought something bad was happening. It sounded like something awful was going on.
All right. Give me just a second. I don't think he's on yet.
All right, Enforcer's hamster just stopped. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
All right, the hamster's running again. Can you still hear me?
Yes, I'm just trying to get the volume all the way up to max. All right. And so with that, please continue where you left off.
All right, and we were on NOYDB's super chat, who says poll suggestion: Alexei Novikov, Vasil Virostuk, Kostiantin, Ilan, Alexander, Lashin, best Ukrainian strongman? Question mark.
I don't really know how that pertains to the poll. To a poll.
That was a suggestion.
Oh, yeah, I guess we could do that if you're fine with that, Matthew, and you don't see any problems with it.
I actually, honestly, in OYDB, I can't really make out if that's names of multiple people or is that like a couple of different names. I really can't tell. And also, I'm not sure if anyone in the live chat would really know who these people are anyway. But I'll leave it up to you, Enforcer.
I'm not really sure because I don't know. We'll think about it. We'll put that one under advisement in a YBD. Just make sure to have a I guess you could say poll token that you can redeem at any time. I don't know if we'll do it tonight, but we may do it some other time. Maybe tomorrow.
Okay, NOYDB just said you are correct. I'm messing with you. So that's good to know, NOYDB. We were trying to be very diplomatic about that. We weren't sure what to say about it, but it's good to know you're just joshing around. And thank you once again for the support. And we're now moving on to another super chat from NOYDB. He puts in another $3 donation and says, ever hear of the Avro Arrow? Canada wants to know. The end of that program signaled a lot of Canadian engineers heading to the States and NASA.
Yes, I have heard of the Avro Arrow. It was actually a pretty advanced aircraft, at least in terms of its speed as an interceptor plane at the time it was designed during the 60s. But sadly, due to some diplomacy in between the United States and Canada, they decided to sideline the program, although it seemed that it was going to be an incredibly cheap to produce aircraft with some incredibly good flight characteristics. They decided to sideline it, I believe, to get some Voodoos instead, which were far less capable and far less performance wise than the Avro Arrow. But I have heard about it, and that is true. So I thank you very much for the support in YBD and letting us talk about that tidbit of information for a moment. The Avro Arrow, I honestly thought, looked pretty cool too. So with that, we're on to the next one, and thank you once again for the support.
All right. And up next, we have a $2 super chat from That Frost Wolf, who says, can I get a yippee? And typically I do yeehaws, but yes, you can get a yippee. Yippee! Also, salute Matt and Leafs.
And thank you so much for the support. Of course, it helps out our channel a lot. And I hope you like the little yippee you got there from Matthew. And so with that, we're on to the next one. And thank you so much for the support.
And up next, we have a $2 super chat from B-Lord, who says, I don't have too much from Poland, and I hope it helps.
Well, I thank you so much for the support. And it is cool to hear that we do have a decent amount of viewers from Poland. Analytically, this was something interesting to me when I saw the analytics and it all got broken down to me. Our largest viewer base is from the United States. Actually, let me go real quick and go look that up on my second monitor because I think y'all will find that about as interesting as I did. So let me hop over here. Let me go by geography. So over the lifetime of the channel, most of our viewers, 54% of them are from the United States, 9.3% of them are from Canada, 6.1% of them are from the UK, 5.1% are from Australia, 2.6% are from Germany, and then from there, everything's about less than 1%. But still, it's really cool to me to see the demographics broke down because I think Poland is, let me go through here and look. Where's Poland on this list? It is right under Thailand. Over the total lifetime of this channel, we've gotten a total of 58.4 thousand views from Poland. And that's really cool to hear that you are from Poland. And so I thank you so much for the support. We don't have a lot of Leaf Spring Army members from Poland. Only 0.4% of our viewers are. So you are in a small group, and I thank you so much for the support. And of course, it doesn't have to be a lot. It's just a thought that counts, and we greatly appreciate that you're helping this channel to keep on running. And so with that, we're on to the next one. And thank you so much once again for the support.
All right, and up next, we have a $2 super chat from Paddington, who says, I can donate $2. Thanks for the program.
And thank you so much for the support. It doesn't matter what amount it is. We're just greatly appreciative that people do enjoy this channel and want to keep running. And so thank you so much for the support. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And up next, we have a $2 super chat from the B Knight 3, who says, "Can't we all just get along?"
I would have to say, why can't we all just get along? And so with that, thank you so much for the support. Hope that does address the comment in a way. And with that, we're on to the next one.
And for the final 2 super chats of the night, we have a $1 super chat from Guns and Gaming and a $1 super chat from Susie Hugh. So thank you very much to both of you for your support. And they don't leave comments, but thank you very much. And with that being said, we are now done with our super chats, and we are ready to move on to our live chats. So Enforcer, is the hamster still running?
Yes, and due to time constraints tonight, since we're almost running marathon length for some reason tonight, I don't know how we did that, we're going to only be able to answer 5 live chat questions. I'm sorry it's not as many as we usually do, but I hope you all understand that we're sort of starting to run overtime, and it's starting to get incredibly long. Of course, it's a endurance marathon for Matthew, me, and all of y'all, and so I want to make sure that we don't make it too long. So with that, we're going to move on to the first live chat question.
All right. And moving on to our first live chat question, we have a question from Joseph Neves, who says, "Enforcer, how would you re-secure the Zaporizhzhia Nuclear Powerplant?"
Re-secure the Zaporizhzhia power plant. That's a pretty tough one to answer because any action to take it, retake it, would have to push pretty much from Vasilivka down the P-37, and that's really the only way I could see it being retaken. The Ukrainians wouldn't be able to amass any kind of naval invasion force from Nikopol to cross the river because it's literally just about a mile or 2 apart, and the Russians would see what was going on for days and most likely attack it. So I think the only route I could see to retake Enerhodar is if the Ukrainian army was slowly rolling its way back through the country and just happened to make it down the P-37 to there. So with that, I hope that does answer the question, and with that, we're on to the next one.
And up next, we have a question from Snafu, who says, "Enforcer, will the people who have lost their homes and belongings receive financial assistance to rebuild their lives after the war?" And that's actually something I've always wondered myself. I wonder how common is home insurance in Ukraine, as well as is there any like non-governmental associations or things of that nature that will help people rebuild their homes? Because hopefully so, because it wasn't the Ukrainians' fault that their whole lives got upended, and hopefully they can get some help.
I actually have to agree with Manny. I don't know a specific answer as to whether they'll give financial support for that or not, but I feel like they would because, home insurance is a thing. I don't know if a lot of Ukrainians have it, but that would be pretty messed up to think that their homes and their belongings got destroyed and there's just nothing left for them. There's not even financial compensation for it. So to give you an answer, I'm not really sure, but I feel like based off of how, the United States is with home insurance, I feel like insurance would cover it. But then again, I'm not really sure if insurance covers acts of war. So with that, we're on to the next one. I hope we were able to kind of give an idea that we really don't know the answer either, but it most likely will come down to home insurance. And so with that, we're on to the next one.
And up next, I'm seeing a lot of people in the live chat saying that, do insurance plans even cover acts of war? And, honestly, I'd be curious to know. I really don't know. But if anybody is a authority on insurance policies, that'd be kind of good information if you could put it in the live chat. So up next, we actually have a super chat from Rob ICX Man, who puts in a $20 donation and says, "I'm quite sure it is an SOP for all nuclear reactors with a K effective or K effective equal to or greater than 1. The reactor will scram, supercritical reactor Axeman, with a complete loss of power. The boron control rods drop and shut it down."
Well, thank you very much for the support, Rob. And unfortunately, I don't know the exact technical talk you are talking about, but based off of my limited knowledge, if a power plant gets disconnected from the grid, it has to activate its emergency generators and then go through the shutdown process. And that's really the whole point of the emergency generators, is just to make sure that coolant keeps on pumping through the core, and so that way they don't melt down and they can go through the shutdown process. So I would have to agree. I don't know the exact technical terms, but if it's what I'm thinking it is, it sounds very similar to the shutdown process stated earlier. So I thank you for the support. You sound like you know a lot more about nuclear technology than I do, and I thank you very much for sharing that with us and letting us know a little bit more about how that process works. And so with that, we are on to the next one, and thank you once again for the support.
And next up, we have a question from OK, let me sign up. And yes, you can sign up. The LSA is accepting new recruits. And they say, Enforcer, how sustainable would it be for Ukraine to use the Iron Dome, considering the amount of missiles they would burn through?
It would be, well, considering that a single missile costs somewhere around, I think, $100,000 to $200,000, it wouldn't be too unreasonable, considering that it would be saving countless amounts of lives and also property that wouldn't be destroyed any further. So I think it would be economically feasible in that regard. But at the same time, that is a great question because the Israeli Iron Dome system usually involves dealing with a low density of fire, and the Ukrainians would have to deal with a high density amount of fire. In fact, they would have to constantly be getting missiles from overseas to keep those things going. So I'm not really sure if they would be viable now that you bring up the supply side of things, but I still think they would be better than nothing, even if they could only be active or shoot down a certain amount of the missiles. And so with that, I hope that does answer the question in a way. And with that, we're on to the next one.
And up next, we have another super chat. This time it is from Melissa Harden once again, who puts in a $5 donation. And I think she's clarifying the super chat from earlier. She said, comment was based on tonight's video of the constant hits on the trenches, just kept hitting in front of or rear of the trenches.
And that is true. Thank you very much for the support. But one of them did hit inside the trench, but due to how the trench was shaped, it did break up the shrapnel really easily, and it didn't really get a large blast radius. But that is true. I did get that part, and I thank you so much for the support, and I hope we were able to address that comment. And thank you once again for helping this channel to keep on running. And with that, we're on to the next one.
And up next from the live chat, we have a question from Jerry East, who says, do you think that we would use Morse code again if all other electronic systems fail on the planet?
I think that we might. That's something I really can't answer, because if all electronic systems fail in the world, Morse code most likely would too. But I just don't really know. I mean, like I would assume, considering that would be the only form of communication at that point that could be done electronically, yes, we would, because any form of communication is better than nothing, and Morse code is the first step in the direction of, I guess you could say, high-tech communication systems like cell phones, and email as well. And so with that, I hope that does answer the question, at least in a way. And with that, we're on to the next one.
And up next, I want to give a shout out to Graham197103010 for putting in a £10 donation. Thank you very much for your support of the channel. And I know the Enforcer likes to see donations come in pounds, so I'm sure he wants to say something about that.
Yes, I do, and I thank you so much for the support, Graham. I actually addressed your live chat earlier, and I thank you very much for the support and helping the channel to keep on running. And it's very cool, like Matthew said, to get donations in pounds. And now that I've held this headset beside my head long enough, I'm going to unplug it and pray that it has enough battery to get through the rest of the stream. But pounds are really cool. I'm a huge fan of them, and well, not really a fan of them because, you know, they're pounds, but a fan of them because they come from the United Kingdom. And so I thank you so much for being one of our British Lee Spring Army members. I think analytically, let me check, y'all are the third largest viewer group we have on this channel, accounting for 6.1% of our total viewers. The only group larger than that is the United States and Canada, with Canada being 9.3%. and the United States being 54%. I know I'm kind of oogling over stats, but I really think it's cool that we have an international viewer base, and now I've actually found the place where I can find the numbers of how many of y'all are from where. So thank you once again for the support. It does help us out a great deal, and also it's cool to see that we have Lee Spring members from the United Kingdom in the live chat and helping us to keep this thing going. And so with that, we're on to the next one, and thank you once again.
And up next, we have another super chat from NOYDB, who puts in a $1 donation and says, potato, 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 carrot, 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 potato, 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 dot Morse.
Well, I thank you very much for the support, and if I'm correct, that would spell out dash SOS? Maybe? I don't know. But I thank you for
the carrot, potato, stew.
Yeah. Maybe. But I thank you very much for the support, NOIBD. And with that, we're on to the next one.
And up next, we have a $10 super chat from Revenge, who says, "Good day and hello to everybody. Good day to my fellow Aussies. I'm new, just making a donation. Australia."
Australia. Welcome to Australia, But I thank you so much for the support, Revenge. And if you're new, welcome to the Lee Spring Army. I hope you enjoy it here. It's a fun, sometimes a war is not a fun thing, but it's a fun place to be. There's a lot of interesting people who are on here. And also, I thank you so much for enjoying the stream and helping us to have the ability to keep it running. And so, with that, thank you once again. It's good to see that we have new viewers in here, and I'm glad that you're one of them. Of course, just to go over the analytics, the Australians make up 5.1% of our viewer base, making up 818,242 of our views out of the total of 16 million that we've gotten. And so with that, that's really cool to see that we have another Australian here. And of course, I'm interested in where you are. Don't dox yourself, though. But thank you once again for the support. And thank you for helping this channel to keep on running. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And up next, we have a live chat question from Packrat, who says, "What is up with China closing off political, climate, and other communications with the U.S.? How do you guys think it'll impact our economy, and etc.?"
Can you reread that one real quick?
Yes, Packrat said, "What is up with China closing off political, climate, and other communications with the U.S.? How do you guys think it'll impact our economy, and etc.?"
It doesn't really impact our economy much because while the diplomatic channels have been closed, the trade channels are still running at full speed. So it doesn't really do a lot to affect our economics. It's more of just a diplomatic gesture in a way. And just to say something, the French actually withdrew their ambassadors from Italy not too long ago, about, I think, 2 years or 3 years ago. And now they're back, but at one time, the French and the Italians, even being members of the European Union, were not on good footing. And so this is something that usually does happen when a country is a little miffed at the other for something they've done. So I hope that does answer the question in a way. And with that, we're going to answer the next live chat. I see that we got another one. We'll answer that one, and then one more question from the live chat, and then we'll be rounding out tonight's stream. And so with that, we're on to the next one.
And up next, we have a super chat from Nerber777, who puts in a $5 donation and says, "Getting North Korea to help, all part of the plan, LOL." And that's a hell of a plan.
Oh yeah, that's a real big plan. I'm sure they're going to be turning this war around because if we know anything, they are a really advanced country. One second, everyone. These guys, they're going to be... Oh, come on, Google Images, work with me. They're going to be turning this war around, baby. It is literally pitch black in North Korea, and for that reason, I don't believe in anything that they say because they can't even run an actual power grid outside of Pyongyang. So, with that, we are on to the next one. And thank you so much for the support, Nerber 777. It helps us out a lot. And that was a pretty good comment to make. So with that, we're going to answer one more question from the live chat, and then we're going to be rounding out tonight's stream.
All right. And for the last one of the night, the question comes from Jungle Jim AB9AB. Who says, "Wouldn't a nuclear incident trigger a reaction by the International Atomic Energy Agency instead of NATO?"
It may, but at the same time, if the nuclear fallout lands within NATO territory and actually starts to affect people or they have to get evacuated or something like that, then it would be a NATO problem because the nuclear committee really couldn't do anything to address that issue rather than just say, oh, this is terrible and they should have done something to stop this. So with that, I hope that does answer the question, at least as far as I'm concerned and how I can answer it. So, take it with a grain of salt. But with that, we've reached the end of tonight's stream. I thank you all so much once again for watching. It's been an absolute pleasure to cover the past 24 hours of the war in Ukraine with y'all, and of course give you all the news that we've been able to find. We will of course be here tomorrow. Make sure to show up. It will be the Sunday fundraiser, and we will be trying to get as much support for Ukraine as possible. We're actually going to be doing the International World Kitchen. This is the first time we're doing them, but we did have it as a suggestion, and I made sure to take it down as a note, and we are going to make sure that that is the next one. And so I hope y'all are all here tomorrow, helping us to, of course, blow past that goal on the fundraiser. And I will see you all tomorrow at 10 p.m. Eastern Time for the final day of our coverage this week and also the Sunday fundraiser. Thank you all once again for watching, and I will see you all tomorrow at the exact same time. Good night and take care.
Запануєм і не браття.